Hello, everybody. It's your boy Sitch here with Adam and Seamus of Freedom Tunes. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Very glad to be here. We've had an awesome week so far. I mean, this has been like an incredible week. We launched a crowdfunding campaign for our full-length animated show, Twisted Plots, and after a week, we're like 44% funded, which is incredible.
What's the goal?
And the goal is 500,000 for
Okay, wow, half a
yeah,
million dollars. Holy
yeah. So
crap.
for people who in I like to explain this to people because they go, "Well, where would that money go?" Right? Because most
hmm
people aren't aware of how expensive animation is.
Cocaine, hookers.
No, nope, nope. The
Wait, this is Hollywood, baby. What are you talking about?
you see, if we were doing this in Hollywood, then we would ask for like a $5 million budget, so that 4.5 would be spent on all of those horrible things, and then maybe the rest would be
Obviously,
funded.
obviously, I kid. I
Oh
don't
yeah,
want
of
anyone to
course.
get the wrong impression. I think you're a Christian, right? So,
Yeah, yeah, I'm Catholic.
okay.
But the budget I can actually in our pitch video we sort of account for this budget where the money's going. What a lot of people don't know is an episode of The Simpsons takes about 9 months and costs up to 5 million for an episode of Family Guy. It's like around 2 million to 4 million. I had these stats in the video we did, and then for an episode of South Park, even it's between like 500,000 and a million for as simple as that animation style is. And the reason is because you need a lot of people working around the clock to produce this stuff. Even all the way back in season one of South Park in '97, when they were making this show with the limited style it had back then, it cost about 250,000 per episode, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
without adjusting for inflation. So the
hmm
inflation adjusted cost of a South Park episode in 1997 is around 500,000. And so we're going to be able to produce our entire season for that much. And I put my money where my mouth is on this. I actually produced the first episode out of pocket. So if you go to twistedplots.com and you support the show, you'll get access to our pilot. It's 25 minutes long. We've been getting great audience feedback. People think it's really funny. So we're excited about this. And it's an animated anthology series, some sci-fi concepts, but not every episode sci-fi. And we're just exploring different crazy
Oh, wow.
scenarios and
Cool.
testing out different moral theories. Because I feel like a lot of anthology shows today do this thing where they give you a crazy scenario, but the message is basically always life sucks and your decisions didn't matter. And it's very nihilistic. And
Mm-hmm.
so part of what we're doing is creating something where the morality we have is coming out not through speeches or monologues, but through the storytelling and the jokes. And at the end of the day, if there's one thesis to the show, it's that life does matter, telling the truth does matter, morality is real.
How many episodes are you doing?
So we are planning on doing a 5 episode season, including the first episode that I already produced.
Okay. And
And we're gonna,
is it
yeah. Sorry, go
this?
ahead.
Is it all the same characters in each episode? Or are they different characters? Is it like shorts?
Different characters every episode. So each episode is going to be around television length. Like our first episode's 25 minutes long,
Okay.
and that's going to be about where we're aiming, like 20 minutes or more. And each episode's just completely different characters and a completely different story.
Okay, cool. And you said there's like some sci-fi stuff. Is it like
Yeah, some of like this the second episode that we have planned. I guess even the first episode technically has some heavy. Oh, the first episode for sure has heavy sci-fi elements. The second episode does. The third episode does. It's going to be kind of sci-fi fantasy to an extent because there's certain episodes that don't necessarily involve technology, but do involve like these insane magical scenarios that you couldn't actually have in real life. And part of the idea behind that is I think it's really fun to create this limitless scenario to test beliefs or test ideas or test values. I think, again, a lot of the fun of making an anthology series or even watching an anthology series is going with any particular episode, like, what would I do in this situation? Like, what is
yeah,
the
of
proper,
course.
how would I
Yeah.
react to this? Like, what's the proper response here?
Yeah, Black Mirror does that a lot, obviously.
Black Mirror
Makes
does that.
social
Black
commentary.
Mirror. Yeah, and Black Mirror has some great episodes too. There's the one thing that happens in that show a lot though that does drive me a little bit nuts is I feel like so many of the episodes are like, what would happen if we put a British person's brain in something that a British person's brain doesn't belong in, and then they're
Mhm.
just like trapped in the thing forever. It's like, oh no, my brain's in the toaster now, and it's stuck here for eternity. And we're doing less centered around the technology specifically, and the episodes that do involve technology I think are going to be more oriented towards like um making a point about the broader human condition. So one episode we're making, it involves time travel to an extent, but it's about nostalgia. It's about like exploring the feeling of nostalgia, the way that's seized on by companies, the way we interact with it. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it us blinding ourselves to what the past was really like with rose-colored goggles, or is it something else? So there's a sci-fi element there, but the episode is trying to explore something deeper than like, what if I stepped on a twig and then my grandma was a dinosaur?
Right, right.
Right.
So Freedom Tunes has a very conservative bent to it. Is this, you said something about exploring moral scenarios. Is it promoting conservative moral values? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, I think you could argue that it is. The general idea is I'm trying to write stories that I think are good and interesting and funny. And I just believe that if you're writing from your heart, you're being true to yourself, what's going to happen is your beliefs are just going to come out regardless of whether you're intending to force them in. And I think one issue is a lot of people, and especially conservatives, who are trying to make media for other conservatives or to spread a conservative message, they put the message first and foremost in a way that makes it kind of unwatchable.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, this is what's the problem with Hollywood. All this woke media is just,
Yeah.
they're wearing their values on their sleeves and they're really just hand waving away any other values. And really, I think good storytelling is a kind of a clash of values, a debate over
Yes.
a point of view. And if you have one point of view and then the other point of view is a straw man, I mean, the media suffers for it.
Or if it's just, and sometimes you can do it where one character with one set of values is arguing with another. I think there's a great way to tell, like you said, it's a clash of values. But it's also important to find a way to like explore the inner battle that people fight there, and not just like guys versus bad guys, but like, oh, we've all kind of, not to be morally gray about it, because there is good and bad, but we all have struggles. There isn't some perfect character who's right about everything, and then the political opposition is like bad and wrong about everything. I
Basically
think
woke Hollywood now.
that's exactly how it is. I think what's important too is finding like the kernel of goodness in a bad thing, because that helps you understand why people are gravitating towards it. And so you want to know that, and you want to be able to speak to that if you're able to persuade people. But I guess the short of it, this is a long way of explaining. I'm Catholic, I'm conservative, so my values are going to come out in this, but it's not as if I'm writing this as like, oh, this is entertainment that exists expressly for that purpose. I'm just trying to make good entertainment, and I believe that people who are conservative will like it. I think people who aren't conservative are going to enjoy it too, because they're just good, interesting stories. There's a lot of shows that are and have been written by leftists at a time where they were a little more restrained, where they weren't forcing their values into it in the same way. And conservatives were able to enjoy that stuff too. So I hope that this is going to be a show that everybody is able to watch and find interesting and, ideally take a lesson away from.
A friend of mine was writing a bunch of those Christian movies. It was very important that it scored like 4 doves. I guess there's this Christian rating scale going for Christian films. And I asked him one time, I said, look, do these films really have to be terrible? I mean, they all kind of like suck. And he basically said, yeah, they pretty much have to be terrible. They're like, they're really forced into that. If he would do anything that was kind of original or kind of straight off the beaten path a little bit to entice other audiences in, they would be like, no, don't go in that direction. Just kind of hit people over the head with the Christian message.
And it's a sad thing, because I believe that because I'm a Christian, because I'm Catholic, because I believe Christianity is true, I think if you tell a story with truth in it and it's legitimately real, like you're not trying to shoehorn some value in, but you're just speaking to life and what it's like, I think you can end up with incredible Christian messages. I think, even though it was totally unintended, right? It was totally unintended, but I think The Shawshank Redemption has some incredible Christian elements and Christian allegory to it.
Definitely.
That, again, was not put in there on purpose. I'm happy to get into that too, actually. That's one of my favorite films. The idea that you have, and these are spoilers. If you haven't seen Shawshank Redemption yet, please
it's only
go
like
watch it, right? If you
25
haven't seen
years
it
old,
yet.
right?
But you look at the story in Shawshank, and it's like, all right, you have basically an innocent man condemned for the crimes of others, and he goes into the realm of the guilty, and he's surrounded by people who deny their own guilt. People are kind of fascinated by him, and no one quite knows how to size him up. And he starts to improve their lives, but the real work that he's doing and the real inspiration work isn't just like that he builds a library or that he helps advocate for the prisoners in certain ways. It's what you find out he does at the end of the film, which is he tunnels his way out of the prison. Like, and to me, that's also an incredible allegory for the narrow gate. This is something we talk about as Christians. And the fact that the only other person who escapes with him is the quote only guilty man in Shawshank, right? Red is the only person who acknowledges his own guilt, and he's the only person besides Andy who ends up seeing any kind of salvation. So again, I don't think that film was written with that intention, but I believe that if a story is true in I don't mean true in the literal sense, but true in the moral sense, it speaks to something in us where we can watch it and go, that's right. You know, there's a satisfaction in acknowledging there's something about this story that lines up with reality. I believe a good Christian message could come out even if the people making it aren't Christian. So that's why it's so shameful that so much Christian entertainment is like, hey guys, look what we're doing, and we're going to be really over the top and ham-fisted, when you can actually just tell a good story. You can just tell a good story, and it can bring people closer to God.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So I got a bunch of questions from our community. I think I'll start with, we often talk about conservatism, but Sitch and I, neither one of us are really conservatives. So a lot of times we get pushback. They're like, you guys really need to invite some real conservatives on, or some real MAGA people on. So I wanted to ask you, I don't even know if you're MAGA or not, or if you would call yourself MAGA.
Yeah, so ultimately again, my values are most importantly informed by my faith. I am Catholic. There's a lot that the MAGA movement has done that does align with my values. Maybe some things it has done that haven't. You know, Trump has certainly switched on different positions over time. And so
Yeah,
I couldn't possibly agree with him on everything. I did vote for him in 2024.
Okay.
I don't think he's infallible or can do no wrong or anything like that, but he certainly had my support. And
it sounds like you wouldn't call yourself MAGA, though.
I might. I guess it depends on how we're defining MAGA. Like somebody who supported Trump and voted for him, I definitely pushed for his election in 2024. If we're defining the MAGA platform as like kind of the general populist movement to secure the borders, to ensure America does better on trade, to promote conservative values, yeah. But then I know there's certain elements of MAGA, like, for example, Trump talking about pushing for IVF, maybe some of the weaker positions on the marriage issue, things to do with homosexuality that are probably more liberal. I would say I'm not aligned on those points. But again, overall, as far as politics go, yeah, I did support and vote for Trump.
Right.
And I do.
Okay.
I still think a lot of what he's doing is good. That's, again, not to say he's infallible or I agree with everything he's done.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess you're against gay marriage. You're not in favor of gay marriage, and you're probably against abortion, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100% against abortion.
And Trump, how do you feel about Trump coming out and saying, look, you really can't push hard on abortion. If the Republicans push for a national ban on abortion, it would just make them, they'd start losing elections.
Again, I disagree with him. Obviously, I'm pro-life. I think that is the most important political issue. As far as the polling numbers or how that works in terms of strategy, there's been pushback on that too. I know some people were arguing after the midterms that, well, the reason Republicans lost was because people were upset about the abortion issue and the pro-life movement having victories there. Other people actually said, well, some of this is because the people who were picked to run weren't necessarily the best, like Dr. Oz, for example. So at the end of the day, the issue that is the most important to me is the abortion issue, and I definitely
really, that's your number one issue.
Party should drop it.
So abortion is your number one issue. Would you call yourself a single issue voter?
That's a good question. I guess it depends on how we're defining that, but I don't. So let's say you have two candidates in an election, right? These are the only two people you have to choose from, and one is less bad on abortion than the other. Like, I'm going to pick the one that's less bad rather than sitting the election out or something like that. But yeah, I'm always going to try to vote for the most pro-life possible candidate in any election. I believe you should vote for the most pro-life candidate possible in any election.
And that position is just driven by your religious faith?
I don't think so, no. I believe that the unborn child is a human person, and my religious values would inform that all human people need to be protected. But I don't think you have to be religious to be pro-life. I think that there are very good secular arguments. And I think when you're arguing with non-religious people, it's important to use secular arguments. So, I mean, 96% of biological scientists surveyed in a very large survey said that life begins at the point of fertilization. And then if you want to quibble and make
Life begins, but
yeah,
I'm not. Personhood is really the thing that you're looking at when you're talking about
yes,
a child. So
and
I think
I
the
agree with
secular
you, but
position is like
and,
it's not
and that
really you can't really call it a child or a baby or anything like that until it has some sort of cognitive ability.
well, what I was about to say was you can quibble over whether a specific human has personhood, but I think everyone in history who's argued that some humans weren't people has been proven to be wrong, ultimately. And I also don't think there's any logical place where we can draw a line and say before this point a human is not a person, but after this point they are.
Okay. Well, obviously, I would disagree. I'm pro-choice. I would disagree with you on that, but we don't need to get bogged down in abortion. I am interested because
Well,
there.
that's the thing too, and we don't have to get bogged down on it. I've seen the show. I think you're a smart guy. I think you're
Mhm.
too smart to be pro-choice, genuinely. And it's also because I don't
Well,
think
look,
it's a religious
I think you're a
because I
smart guy
know you're
too.
not
I
religious.
think you're too smart to be pro-life.
But where is I guess where's the
Why are
flaw
you?
in
I don't understand how you see a clump of cells as a child as a person. I think you're too smart for that, Seamus.
well, but then you could make the same argument towards all the biological sciences. How could you say that's life? To me, it's an emotional
Well, you
appeal.
look,
And
you
this
just
doesn't look like what I
look, you're
traditionally
smuggling
think
in a premise every time you say life. Okay, I'm talking about a person.
of.
And
Mhm.
you're saying life. I don't disagree with you that it's life or human life. I mean, obviously it has human DNA. So, and
Exactly.
it has the potential to be a person, but just because something has the potential to be a person doesn't make it a person. So, but look, I don't want to get bogged down in abortion. We're
Sure.
obviously
Can I just make my last point before we move
we're
on?
gonna
I just want to give
disagree.
one
We're
quick
both
response
way
to that.
too smart to get bogged down in this in this debate.
Yeah, no, the last point I want to make is I don't understand how you can say it's a human life but not a person. Obviously, we're agreeing to disagree here
Right. Okay.
for the purpose of this conversation.
So interesting that you're Catholic. Obviously, the Candace Owens shit is a little insane right now around the Charlie Kirk stuff. So, and I know she's mentioned something about Charlie Kirk wanting to convert to Catholicism. So, just on the broad point of the Charlie Kirk assassination and Candace Owens and Catholicism, anything you want to mention on that?
Well, I can't speak too much to what happened with Candace Owens. I know people have been talking about that. I haven't seen much of that, and especially because I've been on the fundraising trail, doing a bunch of different podcasts, booking interviews all day, working on the cartoon. It's been hard for me to be as up to date as I usually am on these things.
Well, it's
But
crazy. It's
well,
insane. So,
I know that with Charlie Kirk, so I can speak to this. When
uh-huh.
he died, I think it hit all of us like a train, including again, you guys would say you weren't conservative. I'm sure it devastated you. I know
Yeah,
people
look,
who are
I was definitely moved by it. I was definitely a little bit down about it a few days later. So it did affect me. And the response to it from many people, like the jubilation that people were having, I found thoroughly disgusting. So I'm
which is
not, like I
so
said, I'm
sick.
not a
Yeah.
conservative. We've
Yeah.
brought up clips of Charlie Kirk that I'm like, that's a little, I wouldn't have said that, but I just, there's no reason for him. Look, I consider Charlie Kirk basically a moderate. So I just thought
I agree with you.
they turned him into David Duke. They turned him into like a full blown racist, which bothered me to no end. So, but I'll
Yeah,
go
'cause,
ahead.
well,
I'll
of
let you
course, they had to
continue.
justify it, right? They had to find a way to justify what they did. Even
That's
if he
what was
was
going
David
on.
Duke,
Yeah.
yeah, even if he was David Duke, it wouldn't be an appropriate response at all. But still, I remember when
It
this first
wouldn't be,
happened.
but I think you would get, I mean, the response to a moderate conservative being assassinated, that was what really hit me. So,
Well, I agree with you. It was insane to see people celebrating. And the point I was going to make essentially was after this happened, there are people I know who don't like grown men who don't pay that much attention to politics who are crying over it. I mean, this is a guy who was just murdered, who was not someone you would look at and see this is a very threatening or say this is a very threatening person. Again, you know, politically, as far as the kind of force that which I believe for good, the force for good that he was, I can understand why his opponents would consider him, you know, like a threatening adversary in that sense. But you look at this guy who's just seems like a regular, normal, moderate conservative family man, and the fact that people wanted to murder him and actually did, and then, like you said, the fact that so many people celebrated was, I think for some people, a black pill. I got to be honest. I was surprised when it happened. I was not totally surprised by people celebrating just because of what I've seen in the last couple of years in this country and how bad tensions have gotten and how crazy some of these people have gotten. But I suppose that's all I can really say about that situation. I didn't pay much attention to what happened with Candace or what she posted along those lines. I know that it was kind of a big topic. I just know that, I mean, listen, my understanding is they were friends. Is that correct? I haven't paid that close of attention to, but I think
Well,
they
I
were
mean, it's
friends.
questionable whether or not they were friends. I just look, if Candace was a friend of mine and she was doing what she's doing to Charlie Kirk after I passed away, I'd say, look, we're not friends. This bitch is like basically trying to destroy my legacy. So,
Well, I wouldn't call her that, but I don't watch her stuff or know. Do you know
mhm.
what I mean? It's hard for me to say. It's hard for me to comment. I just know that if someone who I was close to died like that, I'd probably be unhinged for a while on air.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you have any questions about the quote official narrative?
You know, some people do, and I've heard some of those arguments.
Mm-hmm.
To me, listen, I could be ignorant here. I'm not sure what it is about the official narrative that couldn't have happened, or does it make sense? Um, and a lot of people are questioning it for a lot of different reasons. I know I've seen some lefties saying there's just no way this guy was actually on the left and these text messages are fake. No one really talks like this. I remember some of those arguments
Mm-hmm.
being had. I remember hearing people talk about that. Um, Personally, there's nothing. I mean, I'm not skeptical. No, I mean, it seems reasonable to me that some insane leftist murdered him. Part of the reason that seems
Right.
reasonable is because a bunch of insane leftists celebrated. So I don't know why it would have to be anybody else.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense to me. And it's weird to me that so many people seems like I understand the concept of, people arguing about whether Turning Points USA or Charlie Kirk, had these feelings about Israel. But it's
Mm.
very strange to me that right after he dies, some people immediately try to like take it and make it about Israel in Judaism or something, when, as you said, it's like, okay, you had some person, they seemed like, they were a far left trans activist or had this ideology, and it had nothing to do with anything else other than that.
Well, also, part of me thinks that if something like this had happened 10 years ago, not only would A, you probably not have so many people openly celebrating the way they were, but
Hmm.
B, people probably would be more likely to buy the official narrative. I think that the world has kind of been turned upside down. This whole the flat earth that we're on has been flipped upside down over the past 10 years. And so everybody is way, way, way more skeptical of the official narrative on many important issues. So I get
Hmm.
it. I get why someone's first instinct is to go, it's a conspiracy. That's not genuinely, like, it's not my first instinct to say that with things. But I do think I'm at a point where I would say, at the very least, if I were to find out that they were lying about it or there was misinformation about literally any large event, I would be less surprised today than ever before, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah, people have lost so much faith in the institutions because, especially for the last 10 years, the institutions seem like they've been very ideologically captured by the far left, or at least kowtowing to the left in a lot of ways. And that's bred a lot of skepticism. And it is, I don't know where we're going for the future now, where if even, you have Donald Trump as the president, he's controlling the federal government, Cash Patel's in charge of the FBI. And even that is not enough to be like, no, there's still a conspiracy going on that would implicate Donald Trump and Cash Patel regarding Charlie Kirk's assassination.
Yeah. Now, I will say, to play devil's advocate there, even though I think I agree with a lot of what you said, when it comes to Cash Patel, the sense that I get from people is something strange happened. He changed his tune after he entered the FBI. So I think the argument would probably be made
Mm.
that he's controlled opposition. But that said, that said, I would say that I think you're right. Faith has been lost in the institutions, and you might not expect this from me necessarily, because I have been so opposed to so many of these institutions for years and years now, and I've promoted skepticism towards them when they've been wrong through my work. But I think it is a good thing for people to be able to trust the institutions. And I actually think it is bad for your psyche to be in a position for too long where you're not able to trust them. So,
Right.
just to help people understand what I'm saying, my argument is not to trust the institutions at all. But here's my point. I think if we create an analogy here, like you look at a family, you're supposed to be able to trust your dad. If your dad's a pathological liar, he's an alcoholic, there's some serious issue, okay, well, it's actually better for you not to trust him given that circumstance, given that series of issues. But it's also not an ideal situation. It's like bad for your psyche that you were raised in a home where you weren't able to trust your father, even though in that situation, trusting your father would be a bad idea. So my argument is on a social level, I think it is a bad idea to trust these institutions, but I also think we have to acknowledge some of the damage it does to your psyche. And you have to be careful and try to mitigate against that by not jumping into every conspiracy theory you hear.
Mm-hmm. Completely. Yeah.
Are you good, Sitch? I just what the controlled opposition? What does that mean?
Yeah, I was gonna ask. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh well, no, I think people would listen. Whenever you're dealing with any of these institutions, especially the deep state, there's a lot of scary stuff going on behind the scenes that we just don't know about as regular people. And so if Kash Patel says, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and then he doesn't do it, people go, did they get to him? Did they threaten him? Is he afraid? What's the deal? I get the feeling that people don't feel like he's on their side anymore. And I especially get the feeling that people don't feel like Pam Bondi's on their side anymore.
Is this about the Epstein stuff?
I think the Epstein files are a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
But
why would
people are also disappointed about the JFK file releases.
Right. Well, I mean, with the JFK thing, I don't think there's much of a there anyway, except that it could be that the government feels somewhat responsible because of all the failed assassination attempts on Castro. Could have been a motivating factor for Oswald. But what with the Epstein stuff, because yeah, I mean, I don't really like that they've completely fallen on that. Why would that be the deep state though? I mean, it seems like it's very clearly coming from Trump himself saying this.
Well, I think that my understanding is Patel and Bondi were like, we're going to release these files, and that they were going to, and then what was the argument given when they didn't release it? I'm trying to remember. It was something like too many important people would be implicated. Do you guys remember the exact wording?
I don't remember the exact wording, but that was the concept, I think.
Yeah, that was the concept.
She said Donald Trump is in the files and he's all over them. If we release him, MAGA's going to revolt.
It's tough.
That's the exact quote.
But to me, I don't think he's in the files. I think if he was in the files, we would know by now. But the argument that
I saw Elon Musk tweet, and he said
Elon Musk did say he's in the file. Listen, all I can say personally, because again, I have no idea what Kash Patel's motivation would be. I just know that this is an argument a lot of people have been making. I think it would be easy. My point is just that I think it would be easy for people to dismiss an argument that, like, because Kash Patel is involved in the agency, that they're going to be able to turn it around.
Yeah, but I think it's weird that, like, if it was just like Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and they're just kind of doing what they're doing, and Trump wasn't really like engaged, I could kind of understand a lot of the feeling like, okay, maybe Kash and Pam, something's up with them. But when Trump himself is like pushing the narrative of that the Epstein stuff is all a Democratic hoax, and
I didn't like that at all.
Talking about it, it seems very clear to me. Like, okay, well, he's the president. He put them in that position. He's obviously dictating what's going on there, and yet he's somehow seeming to like skate by in terms of responsibility on this issue.
Well, I think I hear you on that. I think one argument people could make is he's trying to support his people or something like that. But I think I would agree with you that it's strange and I don't like it. I was upset to hear him say that when he initially said it, that it was like what do you call it, a Democrat hoax or something? Yes. I thought that was ridiculous.
Yes.
For me, it was kind of a black pill because I just thought, listen, if he didn't release it, like I just don't think it's ever going to get released.
Yes.
That's the black pill there for me. It's like, who else? Who are we going to vote for to release the Epstein files? Like, first of all, if anyone runs on that, I just wouldn't believe them at this point. But secondly, if he didn't do it, I just don't think anyone's going to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And I think a lot of people feel that way in terms of like, okay, well, I guess we'll never find this information out ever. So.
Yeah, it's really, really, really disappointing. Huge black mark on the administration overall.
Yes.
Do we move on, Sitch?
Well, I just want to ask, and this again, it goes a little bit back to Candace, but not directly related to her, is
Mhm.
that um there's like been this because she was like really big on trying to push this like concept of like we need to get rid of the concept of Judean Christian values.
Mm.
So I don't know if you have a feeling about any of that.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I do think that that's a word that was sort of used politically for a long time. I think that you do have Christian values, and I think that you have Jewish values, and there is some overlap between them. So, for example, ideally, like the Ten Commandments, the things that you'd read in the Torah or the Old Testament are overlapped. But one important aspect of Christian theology, and this is a big area where Christians and Jews differ in terms of their theology, is the way the Jews see it is, we are God's chosen people. And then Christianity is this group that broke off and started their own new religion, but we're still continuing the line from Abraham. The Catholic position, the Christian position, is that the Catholic Church is carrying forward that same faith system, and that when Christ entered history and died and resurrected, he came and fulfilled the law. And so we believe that everything that was in Judaism is contained in Christianity moving forward, all of the things that we would align on, like the Ten Commandments, like those initial books in Scripture. And so, in that sense, like Judeo-Christian sort of becomes a redundancy, because our
Mm-hmm.
belief as Christians is that we've absorbed that canon, or that we're the inheritors of it. And that what separates Jews and Christians as distinct theologies is that Christians believe in Christ and Jews don't. And so you're either communicating something redundant, which is, Christians believe in the Ten Commandments, etc., or you're communicating something that could confuse people and be contradictory, like the areas where we differ on are compatible or something like that.
I mean, well, I just want to say, yeah, I don't really like follow Judaism, even though I was raised Jewish. But it's funny because, like, growing up Jewish, I was bar mitzvah and all that stuff. I never, at least in any times I went to temple or anything, I never had like this concept of like, you are the chosen people. Like, that never
Mm.
came up. No one
Oh,
ever told me about this. It's funny. I only like even learned about that, I think, once I started streaming and I'd hear it, and then I would start to say it as like a joke to other Jewish people because I thought it was funny. But I think in terms of like the concept of Judean Christian, like the terminology, I always viewed it as it was just a way to sort of, I hate to use it because it's sort of been a bad word now because of the woke left, but it's just sort of like a way to be inclusive, or a way to sort of try to tamp down on anti-Semitism that can arise in some areas of the country or some ideologies. Say like, listen, we're all kind of, don't have a lot of shared values. We shouldn't hate each other. And to me, that's really all it really kind of symbolized, or the purpose of it, I should say.
so I have a question for you. I have a couple comments, but you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned going to synagogue and you weren't told like you are the chosen people or we're the chosen people. I mean, I would imagine that's pretty typical. I think that's typical of most religious experiences. As a Catholic, when we went to church, obviously we would talk about Christ and the way in which he chose us, but it wasn't like we were sitting there going like, you are the chosen people. I think that terminology in those words probably isn't gonna come up very often.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But
Right.
by definition, if you're part of a religion, right? Like if you're picking this religion, ideally you would choose the religion that you think God chose. Because if you're choosing a religion that you don't think God chose, you need to convert to something else. Because the point is to
Right.
get to know Him and love Him and serve Him. And so I just want to ask you actually. So you said you were raised Jewish. Was there any
Mm-hmm.
particular reason you decided to stop practicing?
Well, before I answer that on the whole like chosen people
Sure.
thing,
Yeah.
yeah, like even and maybe it's different, because I went to probably a very like more lefty synagogue.
You
I guess
reformed.
I went to a more conservative synagogue when I was younger, and then we went to a more lefty when I was older. But maybe there are some synagogues where they kind of have this concept about like you are special or chosen. I never experienced that. I never experienced any sort of, the rabbis never say anything about like Jews having some sort of like special responsibility or special place in the world. I don't know. It just never really came up in any of the teachings that I remember,
Can
or
I
my bar
ask you,
mitzvah or
were
anything.
you conservative? Were you reformed? Where would you?
So it was originally I think it was I'm trying to remember. I think originally it was a reform temple, and then it was a reconstructionist temple, which is a little hippie-ish to some extent.
Okay.
But
Yeah, my understanding is reform is more liberal, right?
It's it's more liberal than obviously conservative. So
And then would Reconstructionists be a step further in that direction?
yes,
Okay.
yes. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
the conservative Jews are out there talking about being the chosen ones, but I've never experienced
Yeah.
that.
Well, I'm just curious. I mean, this is genuinely just me asking for my own curiosity too.
Yes.
Like because obviously your experience is not going to be the same as everybody else's, especially because, as you mentioned, your synagogue was a bit more liberal.
Hmm.
But, you know, would you and your parent, like, did your family talk about religion often? Was it something that you were mostly taught at synagogue? Were there like, we're in this religion, so we don't do this? I'm just fascinated because
Right,
I don't
right.
think of, yeah, I have,
So,
I have some friends who were like raised in conservative Jewish households. I'm also kind
hmm
of curious about like
hmm
Reform Jews and also your experience specifically.
yeah. No, it's an interesting question. My father's side, even though like he was bar mitzvah and all that stuff, he wasn't very religious.
Mhm.
He had a very negative experience because the rabbis at his synagogue were like really horrible,
Mhm.
apparently. And where he grew up, actually, he grew up in Connecticut. He said there was like a lot of anti-Semitism. So I think kind of like I don't know, he wasn't super religious, though he would go to temple with us and everything. My mom was far more into Judaism and religious, and her father was a lay rabbi, and he would like when they lived in a small town in Georgia, he would do like services for the local Jews and stuff. And, he'd always like to have these very theological conversations with me and my brother and the family and stuff. So he was a lot more religious focused in that regard. So no, I mean, I think I grew up with like a decent amount of religious conversations and religious thought. My mom's also like kind of into a lot of new age stuff, so that would always like bleed into it.
Mm.
So it's definitely not like the standard Jewish growing up experience, I would say, in terms of theology.
And then if this is too personal, don't answer. But why did you decide to leave?
So the new age stuff stuck with me more than the Judaism stuff.
Interesting.
And without getting to like a whole long thing, I would just like I spent a long time in middle school and high school like trying to figure out the universe, the big questions.
Yeah, of
And a
course,
lot
dude.
of the more new agey stuff just made more sense to me. So I just kind of went off more in that direction.
So what about the new agey stuff? Sorry, I know this is not what we were here to talk about, but religion, obviously,
Well,
my audience knows religion is
that's
like my favorite topic. So
that'll be we could do an entire stream. That's a conversation I think for a different stream.
100%. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that later. I'd love to talk about that
Okay.
later because, yeah, no, it's a fascinating conversation. It's a fascinating conversation. I always, even though again, I'm always gonna promote my faith. I firmly believe that the Catholic Church has the fullness of the truth. I always
Hmm.
appreciate when anyone is seeking truth or engaged in these matters because you can't have a conversation with someone and then there's less
Of
of a starting
course.
point too if someone doesn't care or never really considered it or thought about it.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I think generally people, I don't know, because I'm not atheist at all. I like very strongly believe in God.
ooh,
Um,
atheist. Ugh.
yeah, I'm like this guy over here.
Well,
Um,
I am technically an atheist, but
there you go.
Are
Listen,
you
it's
well
better.
you're like what would you say like an
I'm an
agnostic
atheist
atheist?
for Jesus. So
Let's I'd love to talk about that actually. Sorry, Sitch, but you were
No,
I
I
interrupted
was
you,
just
I
gonna
think.
make I'm gonna say, listen, the people that believe in God are better than these disgusting atheists. So
okay.
tell us about your atheism for
No,
Jesus.
let's move on to post-liberalism. Come
Oh, okay,
on.
we do that.
Post-liberalism. Are you a post-liberal? And if you are, what the heck is this?
Yeah, I've heard this phrase thrown around before. I remember Sor Bamari was on Timcast a while ago, and I had a good conversation with him, and he talks about post-liberalism. I haven't looked too deeply into it. I guess, as mentioned, my faith is mostly, or my values are very strongly informed by Catholicism. So if there's like specific post-liberal ideas you can point me to, I can tell you whether or not I'm post-liberal on that issue. My understanding, and I'm going to give a very vague, broad explanation of it as someone who admittedly doesn't know much about it, is it's just based on the name, obviously making the argument that like liberalism has failed us in some significant ways and we need to move past it, or is it the argument
Yeah,
that we
no,
already have,
that's
or is it the
that's
argument
what
that we already
people.
have moved past it and we don't realize it?
Well, I think people make both those arguments. So,
Okay.
how do you feel about individual freedom?
That's actually like a very pointed and funny question. I mean, yeah, obviously individual freedom is an important thing. I guess the question is, how are we defining this? And I don't know that I would agree with how post liberals refute the argument of what individual freedom means either. I know that the traditionally Catholic argument about what rights are and what they mean is different from the classically liberal perspective, and there's definitely overlap. This is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, actually, so it could be interesting to get into it
So
here.
what is
Yeah.
the difference? Are you in the
Yes.
natural rights camp?
Oh, well, I certainly believe in natural rights, but here's how I would express them. The traditional Catholic view of morality, and again, this is me also, well, I don't want to throw too many caveats on this, but the traditional understanding that has generally been held is that rights and duties are linked, and that's something that classical liberals believe as well. We just disagree over where the link is or how it occurs. So the classically liberal position is you have certain rights, and then based on how you exercise those rights, you incur certain duties.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But the traditional Catholic view actually is you have duties, and your rights are necessary in order for you to be able to fulfill your duties. So, for example, like you have a right to keep and bear arms. Yes, the reason you have this right is because you have a duty to protect your family, to defend yourself, to, arguably, according to the founders, revolt against tyranny. So even though the classical liberal and the Catholic are going to line up on a certain number of like what our rights are, the way we justify the existence of those rights is different. And so usually we don't get into this in modern political conversations because it seems really esoteric and why get that down to the base principles of it. But there are obviously implications that you reach further down the line based on those systems of thought. So someone who says they believe in individual responsibility and freedom is probably someone I'm going to agree with on like the vast majority of what they consider our rights to be, but I would probably have a different understanding of what justifies those rights.
Right. Yeah.
Well, so like it seems like so much of the conversation on internet politics right now is centered around the concept of post-liberalism. And so on the left, we have, the communists, obviously, who want to push their philosophy. And then on the right, we have the monarchists. You have the, whatever you'd call the Curtis Yarvin, like techno-fascist, techno-monarchists. I don't know, whatever you'd call them. You have the actual fascists and all this other stuff. Like, I guess the question is like, where do you see yourself in any of this stuff? Are you like, no, I like Western democracy, capitalism, good, or maybe something entirely different?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I think whenever anyone asks you what your political beliefs are, there's like three basic answers. There's, if I found a genie in a bottle, right? I'm writing letters to Santa. I can have the perfect thing. What would I have? That's like one layer. The second layer is, what can realistically ever actually happen? What's actually going to work? The third is like, what's going to work right now? So obviously, as a Christian, I believe that heaven is a kingdom, so I can't say monarchy is bad or I'm against monarchy. But if you're talking about making America into a monarchy or something, that's like a LARP. That's not going to happen. And also, I'm not of the position that there's one specific system that works everywhere all the time. I think that this is part of the failure of the thinking of neoconservatives, conservatives, and thinking that you can like import democracy into Afghanistan and have that work. I think you can't have an aristocracy. You can have an oligarchy. You can have a well-run republic like the United States was intended to be. And I think these are all good systems. I think the question is whether any of those systems work with the particular culture that you're trying to impose them on. Does that make sense? Like my position is not that there's one system that we have to have. I think that there's a number of different systems that work, and it's a prudential call based on the culture or like the cultural environment that the government's supposed to exist in.
Is monarchy one of those systems? You listed them off pretty quick.
Yeah, I think yes, I think monarchy can work. Yeah, I think it's hard to argue as a Catholic too, because there are saints who were kings. If monarchy was inherently immoral and it was like an inherently bad thing, I don't think we could have saints who were kings. And I don't think.
Well, look, I think monarchy is inherently bad. I don't think monarchy can work. I think monarchy is the same as fascism or any sort of authoritarian government. Yeah.
So why inherently?
Let me ask you a question.
By the way, I just want to be really clear because I want to make one more point before we jump into this. Another thing that I believe is all things being equal. Let's say you have two separate ideas and they're both equally good. I think there's virtue in erring on the side of the status quo. I think that it's better not to try to shake a system up if the thing that you have is working and it's not like seriously
Well, I mean,
morally inferior to the alternative. Yeah,
it
so,
depends upon the status quo, obviously. Like,
well, that's why I said all things being equal, right? If your status quo is like some horrible thing, I think you should change the
well,
things about the
look, the
status quo that are
status quo
horrible.
can be like heaven on earth for some people, and actually a living hell for other people. Obviously, slavery was that situation. So,
Well, that's how. Well, then I guess that gets into a whole conversation about moral relativism and whether you believe that there is an objectively better or worse situation, or if it's
I
just all a
do.
matter of personal
I do.
preference.
I know. I do believe. Look, and that's another question that I had because I was going to ask you on the justification. Is the justification based in God? Is that what you would say the justification is? So
Yeah, I
whatever,
think whenever it
whatever
comes to a
philosophical.
metaphysical,
Hold on
yeah,
one sec. Whatever
yeah.
philosophical point we're talking about, you feel the justification needs to be based somehow in your faith or somehow in an all-powerful God.
So, in the same sense that I believe the justification for all of reality existing is placed in God, like I believe God made the universe. I believe
Okay.
that God set up the rules for what is right and what is wrong. And this is one of the difficulties in having these conversations with people you just don't share that framework with, because I think there are things you and I can agree on that I could persuade you of. But that conversation is like speaking with reference to things that don't mention religion. So, again, on abortion, obviously I believe that abortion is wrong, and you can say my religious principles are there, but I believe my religious principles are there to the same extent that they are when we say don't kill. Like, I think if there's no God, it's impossible to make a definitive moral claim at all. I think
Well,
it's all
look.
just preference if there's no
So
God.
look, I was thinking more specifically on the natural rights thing. If
Hmm.
like I believe in natural rights as well, you believe in natural rights.
Hmm.
You come to your justification via your faith. I come to my justification through secular means, but still we get to the same place. And sometimes it seems like when we are focused on the justification, since we're both in the same place already, we don't even really, we have different justifications,
Yes.
but we're both in the same place. It just seems like when you go to the justification argument, you're really saying, you're using it to say that if you don't believe in God, you don't have a good justification for this, and you should believe in God. So
Yeah, no, I mean
I
that
think
is what I
more
believe.
justifications for things is better.
But we want people to be building on sturdy ground.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Well,
here's the thing. Here's where we agree again. I think you're right that we probably line up on some number of these issues. And that's also, I mean, generally when I'm having political conversations with people and we're going on an issue by issue basis, I'm not like dragging them down to the moral bedrock of everything and saying like, even though we agree your justification is no good, you guys opened up the
we
conversation.
don't agree on that. Wait a
Yeah.
second here. You think my justification is bad. I think your
No,
justification
I know.
is bad.
But I'm saying if you and I find an issue we agree on, I'm not going to
Right.
go, I agree with you, but your justification is no good, right? For the purpose
Right.
of most conversations. But you guys wanted to ask me about this and about my understanding of rights, so I'm just telling you what they are.
Well, no, I get that. Yeah. It was interesting that you brought up the justification thing, which I just think
Oh yeah.
it is an interesting juxtaposition that we have. So,
Mhm.
Well, but isn't it an interesting conversation? Because this is something I used to think about when I was younger. There was a time where I was not as into my faith, and I was very, very libertarian at that time. And people would talk about rights, and there is this question of like, where do rights come from? We sort of take them for granted, but what justification do we have for their existence? And then you start to explore that, and you think about it, you read about it, and you try to figure out what actually makes sense. I believe, again, as a Catholic, my position does, and you and I disagree, but it's important to have that justification for your morals. I think it's
no,
important to be able to
look,
say,
people are going to look for justifications, obviously. Well, I would say I'm an empiricist, so I'm basing my justifications in empirical evidence. I would say that that's stronger than basing your justification in faith, obviously, because there's a lot of different faiths. So, but
only if you
look,
can.
I don't mind that people do justify things through faith. I think it's nice to have other justifications so we can all orient ourselves on the same page, especially when it's something as important as individual rights, something as important as what we can and can't do. So, I wanted to, let me look at my notes here for a second. There was something we missed. Oh,
Sure.
on the monarchy thing.
Yeah.
So the monarchy thing, I would say look, and I don't see how I think you can say that you're against monarchy just because there's a monarchy in heaven, because obviously if there's a supreme being, all-knowing God, like if he's going to be in charge and make the rules, then I would say that's not necessarily a monarchy. That's like a much different situation. On Earth, we don't have a God. So obviously you're going to be at the whims of human beings, and human beings are flawed. So you aren't going to have you've got a completely different situation with a monarchy and a human in charge.
Well, humans are flawed in any system. And just to be really, really clear, especially if this gets clipped, this is not me making the argument like, oh, the United States needs to move to a monarchist system or anything like that.
How
I'm
do you
arguing
feel about
in
JD?
principle. I believe, does JD Vance want to be the monarch?
Well, no, they blame him for being a Curtis Yarvin
I believe
fan.
in principle monarchy. I believe in principle monarchy works and has worked in different situations. I like the United States as a republic. I think right now there are obviously certain flaws with the system, and I believe our government has degraded in certain ways over the past several decades. But I, again, believe it's important to err on the side of the status quo. And I think there are a number of forms of government that can work and do work, and it's not like a one-size-fits-all system. I think for some people in some parts of the world, monarchy is going to be the system that works best for them. I think here in the United States, just based on the way the nation was founded, I mean, we did not become a republic through reforms. Like, it was the entire intention in setting the system up was to make it a democratic republic. That is the system that's like bred into this nation's DNA. It's very important for us. So, yeah. And, you even look at Europe, and you have different forms of monarchy that have existed. You have, like, you're right, you have these totalitarian monarchies. You also had constitutional monarchies. Now you have monarchies where it's basically a ceremonial position. My point is to just say I can't make the argument that like monarchy is inherently wrong. I definitely can't make that argument. But I guess my question is, so you don't think a monarchy can work at all or has worked at all in any situation? By the way, I'm not challenging your belief that democracy is better at this point. I'm just curious. Do you really think that like no monarchy could ever work under any?
Are you against democracy? Because I know a lot of people on the right are fundamentally against democracy.
I believe that democracy, if you have a democratic republic where like the franchise is limited to people who actually have a vested interest in the future of the system, is a good thing. Like, I don't believe in the idea of continually expanding the franchise out to everybody. So that is a flaw with democracy, but I don't think that like democracy is inherently bad or something like that. I think it's democratic. Sorry, yeah.
The purpose of democracy is to orient the motivations of the political and economic elite to producing public policy that's going to be good for the most of the mass of population. As soon as you disenfranchise anybody in that population, those people don't count to the political and economic elites. Those people tend to be the ones that the costly externalities of any public policy are going to accumulate on. Obviously, like the people in charge during slavery, they don't care about the slaves because the slaves don't vote, right? So this system is everywhere constantly. So when you're talking about a monarchy is one guy who's being held in power by maybe 200 people. Those 200 people are the only people who count to that monarch because they're the ones that keep him in charge. Well, no, I've heard this argument that they care about the people because they're their property. They're their property like livestock.
No. I would not make that argument. No, I don't think that,
so what makes them care about their people?
Again, this is just where you and I fundamentally disagree. I think that you can have belief systems that motivate a person beyond what their systemic advantage or incentives are. Those systemic incentives are. Hold on, you got to let me finish my point. You can so if you have a good Catholic monarch who actually thinks he's going to go to hell if he screws his people over, he's probably going to behave a little bit differently than someone who's only out for money. Now, part of what I want to make clear is I'm arguing that in principle, in different situations historically, monarchies have been good and you've had good kings. I'm not making the argument that there's no benefits to democracy, and I recognize your point that one benefit that a democratic system has is it makes known certain concerns that certain people have. So if a group of people couldn't vote, you can absolutely make the argument, yeah, the elite are going to care less about them. You can also make the argument that if a certain group of people are reliably going to vote in the minority and will never win an election, they're going to be just as disregarded.
Yeah, obviously, if people don't vote, they will be disregarded. That's why they
Well,
should
not just
vote.
don't vote, but if they always vote in the minority. So if there's a specific political issue where some group of people are constantly on the wrong side of, or they're not siding with the majority, then they're going to be disregarded in the same way that like a population that couldn't vote would be disregarded under your theory.
Yeah, they are,
So
obviously.
democracy doesn't solve that problem.
Well, if you have some sort of niche beliefs, if you want to orient society in a way that's going to be at the expense of the majority, then obviously I don't think those public policies should be enacted.
But don't you think it's possible for the majority to enact public policies that take advantage of a minority group?
Well, this is why the Bill of Rights is important, obviously, and this is why America is founded on the principle of individual rights, because there's certain individual rights which can't be taken away by the majority for that
Shouldn't be.
reason.
I would agree. Yeah.
Freedom of speech, the right to bear arms. All you know the basics.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, but then also we're introducing an additional constraint here. So we're not talking about a pure democracy. And I agree.
Well, I never
For
was.
democracy to work, it needs to be tempered by certain principles that can't be violated or can't be put up to a vote.
I'm only talking about the mechanism of why democracy is important. And I only bring it up in the context because you said monarchy can work, and monarchy strips out. Well, look, I'm saying monarchy strips out the mechanism that orients the political and economic elites to do good for the population. I'm sure
that's not the principle. That's a principle.
Do you believe in
principle?
Do you believe in capitalism?
Yeah.
Well, I'll get to the principle in a second.
In this, I'll give a similar answer to democracy. Constrained capitalism. Obviously, we need certain regulations, right? But yes, and I just want to say, I think that is a principle for helping the those in leadership choose the good of groups that would otherwise be disenfranchised. I don't think it's the principle.
Well, let's deal with that in a second. So you believe in capitalism. Why is capitalism good in your estimation?
So firstly, I don't even really love the term capitalism. I think it was like made largely and coined by people who were opponents of free trade and wanted to label the system as something. I believe it's normal and natural and good for people to engage in trade and to try to create things. I think that if somebody creates something, they own it. Getting back to my theory of rights, I believe a man has a duty to provide for his family. Part of what that duty means is he has to have the right to do what's necessary in order to provide for them. He has to have the right to work. He has to have the right to make things. He has to have the right to trade. And so these things are all facilitated by a capitalist system. Now, here's the issue. Sometimes a capitalist system, if it's totally unconstrained, ends up in a position where a tiny minority end up with all of the property, and now your average person actually has far less of a stake in the system because they don't own a piece of it anymore. And so I think that we need to ensure that that doesn't happen. And so there need to be regulations in place to ensure that your average person doesn't end up in a position where they're like economically disenfranchised.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Obviously, you've got to have some sort of constraints. I mean, I would argue just broad strokes, capitalism works because it orients people to create goods and services that are actually beneficial to other people, right? Obviously.
Now, Richard Wolff would tell you capitalism is a monarchy.
Well, look, this is why this is why we make fun of Richard Wolff. It's interesting to me that a lot of people on the right understand capitalism is good because it takes wealth, it orients wealthy people, economic elites, into doing good for society, right? They want to build a better product or service for society that everyone's going to benefit from. The same idea holds true in democracy. But a lot of times people on the right, they're in favor of capitalism, but they're against democracy. When democracy orients the political elite into producing public policy that is going to be good for the majority of people. If you take that away, and we'll move on, I think, we're talking about monarchy where 200 people are the ones that are keeping the guy in power. I think you'll agree it's easier to orient one person into doing good for whatever reason, religious reason, whatever reason they want to do. Maybe they're just a do-gooder, right? Than 200 people who all have different conflicting motivations. So if there's 200 people and those 200 people are more interested in just getting their bag and they don't give a fuck about the people, then in order for the monarch to stay in power, he's going to have to do whatever those 200 people want. And those 200 people would rather, just oppress the population and stay in power.
I mean, not if they're afraid of the public, which does
Mhm.
happen. Monarchs know as well that the people can revolt. And it did happen historically. And there's an argument to be made that what democracy can do is it can pacify people and make them feel like they are more a part of the government and more a part of change than they actually are.
Right. I don't look, people can revolt and people do revolt. Obviously, the military is a big component in this. They're usually the ones with the guns. And when the people revolt, it's usually at the advantage of the military, because the military just lets them revolt until their guy is in charge, and then they just step in and stop the revolt. So, but look,
Again, yeah,
we
it
could
depends on the system in the country. I just want to make one final point that
okay.
my argument is absolutely not that a system that allows for voting or where certain people are able to vote can't work. Like I'm not even disagreeing with you about certain benefits to a democratic system. I'm just saying I don't think it's the only system that can work, and I think the historic record bears out that there have been functional monarchies and that monarchy can work.
Well, I see
And
the
it's
way
also really complicated to have these discussions when we're dealing with the kind of scale that we have today, because nowadays our governments are far, far larger than they were historically. So there's an extra bit of nuance there.
well, look, do you buy into the concept of supply and demand? I know
Yeah, of course.
it seems off topic, but I'll make
No,
the
yeah,
point.
of course.
So supply and demand is like a really super basic thing, right?
Yeah.
Less supply, price goes up. More supply, demand goes down. So this really basic idea is you've got in society political and economic elites. I think obviously there are elites, right? You
Yeah,
believe in
there's
monarchy.
zero
Yeah.
question.
Okay. So if these two groups are always going to be in conflict with one another. So the way I conceptualize any sort of political system, it's like how do you get the people with all of the power and money to do good for society and not just feather their own nests? So I
I
think
think
that is
you
that is a simple problem.
I think that where you and I agree is that it's important to create a system that has the right incentives for
Yes,
people in
yes.
positions of power to do good. There's no disagreement there.
100%
I
agree.
think
Yeah.
where we disagree
Mhm.
is is the degree to which I believe you're limiting those incentives. And I would argue that it's not always that people are going to have this kind of class conflict between those in power and those beneath them. There's going to be some degree of it, but it's going to be more or less pronounced based, again, not necessarily on the form of government, but on their culture, on their belief systems, what their religion is.
Do you think there could be a society where there are no police?
No, I think there are certain systems that don't work, to be clear. I'm just saying there are multiple systems that do. So I'm not saying anyone can try any system. My argument
So
is
look,
I
I'm
don't think
just
there's one specific system which is the only one that works. There are many systems that do not work.
right. I bring up the police thing because it's just I can imagine a world where we don't need any police, where everybody does the right thing. They have some sort of religious belief that keeps them in line, and nobody does anything wrong, so we don't need any police. I just think in the real world, I can imagine it conceptually. I
Yeah.
just don't ever think it would work in the real world. I think you always need to have some sort of check on people.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I'm
but
just
this gets back to but this gets back to the three layers that I began with. There's your perfect ideal system where you're talking to the genie and making wishes. Then there's like what could actually happen in the world, and then there's like what could actually happen today.
I just the check on the system I see is democracy. In the same way the check on capitalism is bankruptcy. I don't there's I don't know any other political system that has that check. So when you say other political systems can work, I'm like, can they? They
Well,
don't have
I
that
just don't
check.
listen. Obviously, we're gonna have to agree to disagree. I do not think that those are the only checks. I don't think those are the only checks.
Okay.
And I also don't think that those checks are only imposed in that specific way. Listen, dude, monarchies have to worry about bankruptcy too.
Right. Well,
So
yeah.
So
yeah,
in the monarchy conversation,
mhm.
I I agree to some extent that like if you went back in time 5,000 years ago, I don't know if you get the population to be on board with a Western democracy. I don't know if it would work in that situation. So I agree that there are definitely different circumstances in which different modes of government are going to be applicable. Like even if you went, to the Mad Max dystopian future, I don't know if you can get a democracy going. You probably are going to need some kind of monarchy or some sort of authoritarian government to sort of to push things in the right direction before you can start moving in a constitutional republic that we would all, enjoy from an American perspective. Um, I think I understand like kind of what you're both saying, because the issue I think with monarchy is that from a purely mechanical perspective of how the system of monarchy works, all of its own internal pressures are pushing the king to essentially just do whatever the lords and the people that control the lands and military want, with very little regard of the people. And now, what you're saying, Seamus, which I agree with, is like if the king or even if the lords have another ideology outside of the purely cynical, pragmatic regaining of power ideology, if they have an ideology that's Christian or some other moral ideology that's motivating them stronger than their own kind of cynical, pragmatic purposes, then yeah, sure, you can have I think, a very just king that could lead things in the right direction. I think where democracy shines is that, it's not perfect, but the mechanisms of power, even if you remove a sort of external ideology that is a good one, it's still more likely, I'd say far, far more likely, to push the people in charge in a direction of actually doing beneficial things for the populace at large, where monarchy does none of that whatsoever without the external philosophy.
Well, I guess where I would disagree is the degree to which a democratic system works without the people occupying that system voting in it or acting as leaders have like a good ideology. Because I think one of the big struggles in the United States today too is America being confused about its identity to a degree. And by the way, whenever you have a system like democracy or any other, one of the things that has to inform you ideologically is like, is it okay to cheat? Like, do I have to even obey the system that I live in?
Right.
So I think that a democracy can fall apart pretty quickly without a just voting populace too, because and there are a number of ways, but the most obvious one is people just voting themselves gifts from the treasury, as they say, and
Mm-hmm.
depleting the country of all of its resources.
Yeah, no, I do agree that the stronger, more moral philosophy or culture ideology is going
Yeah.
to create a better outcome. I'm just saying, like, if you had a monarchy and a democracy side by side, and both of them had no good external philosophy, the monarchy is going to be 10 times, not 100 times worse.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'd have to think about that. And again, I certainly would argue that in the United States, a nation that was founded as a democratic republic, the thing that's going to work here is like Republican democracy, right?
Yes, it is kind of built into the culture from the beginning of America.
Hmm.
Um,
And people
you
fought and
said,
died for it. That's
right,
not,
of course.
that's not something you just throw away.
Yeah, and that's a big thing too. And this is, I think, why a lot of the sort of, neoconservative ideas that you're talking about is where you can't really, I don't think you can really go into a population and just force them to adapt an
No.
ideology. Or if you, I mean, you can, but it'd be like so brutal that most people in modern times wouldn't really want to do it. It's very different than a sort of bottom up homegrown process of people deciding they want to do this and fighting and dying for it, and then
Yes.
attaching that emotional weight to it. But you had said something earlier about limiting the right of voting, I
Oh,
think. And
yeah.
I was, yeah. So like, who were you saying, like, that only certain people should vote?
Yeah, I think a system's always going to function better if people with the same stake. And again, this goes back to my point about like the three levels, right? I'm talking about like a society I think would be better. I'm not saying that we're capable of doing this in the United States, given a legal precedent, given what our principles are as a country.
So this is a
But
level two
yeah,
society.
this is probably like level two.
Okay.
My argument is that I don't think it's like a good or just or helpful thing that a father of like 7 kids who's worked his whole life and is extremely successful can have his vote canceled out by someone who's like $400,000 in debt and just graduated art school. I think in a better system, someone's vote would be at the very least weighted on the basis of their experience, their level of knowledge, and most importantly, their stake in the future of the system. In the same way that I don't think someone who's renting an apartment should have the same stake in what is done to that building as someone who owns a condo in it.
Okay, so like,
Weighted voting, I'm totally in favor of.
I think we've talked about this before. I think last time I was on, you brought up the idea of people with kids having more votes.
Yeah, custodial
yes,
voting. Yeah, exactly. The
yes.
guy with 7 kids would have 7 votes for those 7 kids. So,
I believe that.
Um,
Now, here's one thing I would say
mhm.
but
because
look, we'd be
I
expanding
imagine
the
I
franchise.
imagine well exactly. I think I might know what Sitch's response might be, and it's a fair response. Maybe I'm wrong here, but I think you
Mhm.
might say something like, "Well, now you're just creating an incentive for people to like have a bunch of kids that they can't afford or something." Again, this has to be something that's done like reasonably, and also whether there's a pragmatic way of handling that today. You know, again, it
Well,
also goes into the ideology of the people in that system. But sorry, I'll let you respond now, Sitch.
it's I don't know. I think like your three. I think there is value in sort of the three levels of like how you view government in terms of like, yeah, maybe the most theoretical would be like, yeah, if you had some sort of, if you had God or some sort of ultimate moral being that knows everything as your king, like that's going to probably produce the best results of any system. But, that's not really where we are at the moment. And I would kind of say it's the same thing with voting in terms of, yeah, if only the smartest people
Yeah,
who are not just intelligent, but the most emotionally smart, the most people that like understand the biases and pitfalls of humanity and don't allow themselves to basically just get stuck in NPC mode, because most smart people are just, using their intelligence to justify their preconceived worldview anyway. So it's not
that's
even
true.
really a question of intelligence. Like, yeah, if you just get like all the great people to vote, then sure, it's going to create a better outcome. But my issue is sort of in the pragmatism or the realism, the level one worldview, which is if we have a government that starts limiting people's rights to votes or giving some group of people more rights to votes than others, it's hard for me to imagine that's not going to go down the slippery slope of, well, whoever's in charge, they're going to be trying to expand voting rights for people that
Yes.
give them more power and limit voting rights for people that don't give them more power. And I think
I mean,
that's
that
why it's
happens
important to
now.
kind of,
Yeah,
I know it happens right
exactly.
now with gerrymandering and early voting
Yes.
and voting ID and all these other things. So because of that, I would say I would be highly uncomfortable with anything other than just the standard one person, one vote, and keeping that very cemented in law.
Well, again, at the level of what is pragmatic now, I totally hear what you're saying. And also, I think what you're saying is borne out by the historic record, because what we have seen with democracies is historically is the franchise initially being limited to a small number of people and slowly expanding outward over time. And one of the
Mhm.
reasons for that is because you can get more people to vote for you if you expand the vote. This is one thing people are concerned about with, the border having been open, and the plan many believe that the left had to naturalize a bunch of new citizens so that you could have a bunch of new voters. Democracies are going to tend towards people trying to find new voters, including by expanding the franchise out to people who couldn't ordinarily vote. I think that's going to happen in any system. And that's
Well,
also
mhm.
why I would argue I think a system, it would be better if votes were weighted based on some things like the number of children you have, whether you have property, etc. But I can see issues with the property question right away, right? I mean, if I'm a property owner and my property is increasing in value, I'm probably going to support measures that might make it more difficult for new people to buy and own
Of
property.
course,
So
which we're already
yeah,
seeing right
it's
now.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. So that's why I would argue like my favorite way of limiting it would be the number of children a family had. Obviously, that's not perfect either. And again, this is like a level 2 thing. This is not something I think is going to happen in the world anytime today. I'm not like writing my local congressman and asking for
Mhm.
this legislation. If the Republican Party tried to introduce something that said this, like it would be very bad optically. But you just get my point. We're talking about theory here.
Yeah, yeah. Though it is important because the level two, level three design orients how we view the world or orients where
Yeah.
the kind of the directions that we're going or the things we'll upplay or downplay in terms of whether things are good or bad and
Yeah,
can
and listen,
create,
I'm just being on the sleeve about what my level 2 is.
sure, of
Like in my heart
course,
of hearts, I
of
do think it
course.
would be better if people like with more kids had a more heavily weighted vote.
Do
Um,
you support custodial voting?
um,
JD Vance was in favor of it.
He made some noises about that. I don't think he outlined like an actual specific proposal, did he? Or
No, he
was he just
didn't.
kind of talking? Yeah.
He just, yeah, he brought it up.
What about
But
you,
look,
Adam?
I'm in favor of custodial voting. I think, yeah, we should expand the franchise to everyone. It would
Mm,
shut the Democrats up about lowering the voting age to 16.
To me, I mean, surely we can all agree that lowering the voting age to 16 is a bad idea.
Well, we just expand the vote to everyone, and you vote for your kids until they turn 18. Yeah. So you're the custodian of their vote until they turn 18.
Listen,
then you can go tell them.
Idea.
you can tell your brat you voted for Trump.
I'm running away. Well, no, what would happen is a bunch of kids, a bunch of like brainwashed lefty activist kids would like run away and try to get.
They would call it child abuse. I know, it'd be hilarious. But
yeah, again, like with anything like that, you'd have to be so careful about the way that kind of policy was implemented. I would need to really read a lot about it. But again, in theory, in my heart of hearts, yes, I love the idea.
Okay.
I hate the idea, but it's never going to happen.
Technically, families have a bigger stake in the future anyway, right?
There's no question, yeah. Well, and also it's like, listen, dude, someone's got to pay for your Social Security, bro. Like, if my family's having all of the kids that are going to pay for all of your Social Security, maybe we get a little bit more of a say.
Yeah.
But it's not going to happen.
Maybe, I don't know. JD Vance is probably going to be running in 2028, so we'll see.
Here's why it actually will happen, but not in the way that we're saying. I mean, eventually, even though people do change their opinions over the course of their life, and there's no guarantee you're going to have the opinions that your parents told you to have when you were a kid, nevertheless, your upbringing influences you. And the more kids you have and the bigger your family is, the more likely it is that there are going to be more people promoting your beliefs in the future. So ultimately, it still ends up working out such that whoever has the most children ends up shaping the future of the country.
Yes, definitely.
Regardless.
Look, and you admit it when you say that the guy who's doing the right thing, has a good job, has a big family, and he's outvoted by the kid who has 2 cats and $400,000 in college debt. You said it.
And she can't keep keep the cats alive. She's not even able to take care of them. You know, so she keeps having to buy new cats.
But you are making my argument in favor of democracy. You're saying that the political elite should be oriented more towards helping more people, and they should be helping the guy who has a family and a bunch of kids.
No,
that's not what I'm.
No,
Sitch, I'll let you.
This is Seamus saying that you guys agree on the results, but you have very different rationales for it. Because, and this is why I actually disagree with your custodial voting, Adam, is because you're doing it from the perspective of just you want to expand voting as much as possible so that as many people are represented as possible, so that no one is really getting taken advantage of by the government.
Yeah, by the elites.
Masses.
Yeah,
right? Which I don't think your version of custodial governance accomplishes that, because you're not giving children the vote, you're just giving their parent the vote.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it's not really solving I don't think it's really solving. But anyway.
But look, if parents get an extra 1 to 5 votes, you don't think the political elites are going to be focused on public policy that's good for parents?
They already
I think they would.
They already do that, though.
But they would do it 10 times more, obviously, because it's a massive voter pool. They'd be like, oh, my God.
Maybe.
What do you guys need?
Right. That's a different argument.
You need daycare. You need lower house prices. What do you need? Let me.
But Adam, I don't think your argument is an argument against what I was saying earlier, because as the system currently stands, like democracy exists such that the art student does cancel out the father's vote, and that just is what it is. That's how the system works.
Yeah, because
that's a flaw with democracy. Again, that's just a flaw with democracy. You've got to acknowledge. You mean surely you wouldn't argue it's a perfect system?
Look, hold on a second here. The flaw is that there are all these people that are unrepresented. That's the flaw. In your argument, you were saying, look, there's 7 people here that are canceled out by 1 person. That's not democracy.
I mean, as democracy functions everywhere in the world, it is. If that's not democracy, then we don't have democracy. Sitch, you got to back me up here. If that's not democracy, we literally don't have democracy, because I don't think there's any developed nation that does that.
I'm sorry. I was reading the chat. What?
What do
I back you up?
You're backing me up. Sitch agrees with me. I get Sitch in the custody dispute. No, Adam said that a situation without custodial voting is not democracy. I'm saying it is, and if it isn't, then there's literally 0 existing democracies in the world today. Nobody
go back to the very root, the very basics, like supply and demand. Okay, when there are people represented by a vote, politicians are interested in getting that vote. Obviously, when Trump says he's going to do no tax on tips, he's saying, look, you're a service worker. You have a vote. You should vote for me because I have this policy that's going to be good for you, right? If there are people out there that don't have a vote, there is really no incentive for politicians to cater to those people. He's not going to go out and say there's free ice cream for 12-year-olds on Sunday because they don't get to vote.
But Adam, hold on. The children don't get to vote in the household. So how do we know that their father has their best interest in mind? Is he motivated by something other than democracy?
But look, let's just go back to the basic
I know I
thing.
need an answer to that.
Do you disagree with the premise that if custodial voting is implemented, that the politicians will be focused on making parents happy, giving parents policy that would be good for them and good for their kids, obviously?
Well, hold on. That's if the parents care about their kids, which is something that exists outside the system. Let's
just move on.
Let me just say something, Adam. Hold on.
Let's just move on.
No, hold on. People in the past would consider your argument that a ruler can't care about their people without systemic incentives to be just as cynical as me saying that parents can't care about their children without systemic incentives.
I've already moved on, so let's.
Well, I was going to say that.
You haven't answered my question, though.
I think it's to say, okay, well, there are parents out there that don't care about their kids. For me, it's unlikely that those parents are actually voting. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't actually participate in the voting process. So, but look,
what I'm saying is that
I'm going to go out on a limb and say most parents care about their kids, but we can move on.
I think many parents, but it's not even just a question of caring. It's a question of like knowing what's best. I believe parents do know what's best for their kids, but that's you and I introducing a belief that isn't built into the democratic process. So we're already acknowledging it's not just about the system. It's about the good moral character of the people within that system. Therefore, people can be incentivized by things other than how constituents vote.
Yeah, of course. But I guess I think,
which is my broader point.
Yes, I think, but the argument would be just to sort of like wrap up the custodial voting, which I fucking hate, by the way, just to wrap up the concept of it. Like, I would agree, and I think you would agree, Seamus, like on average, if there was custodial voting, that politicians would be more aligned in terms of like trying to provide, better care for childcare, schooling, and all these other things, because that's going to be a more important voting base. I guess it seemed like, because Adam's position was more about the just giving more people the vote, and your position is more like giving the correct people to vote, and you view having children as generally a positive action.
And not, so and again, and by correct people, I just mean ensuring that the people who are voting do have a stake in the future of the system. That's all.
Yeah, people that you think are more morally correct or better.
Well, not even necessarily morally correct. I don't think that someone's a bad person if they don't have kids or something. There's plenty of reasons why you might not be able to have a kid, but you're going to be most likely less invested in the future of the system than a parent would be.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Well, not a bad parent. Obviously, that person is not invested in the future.
Yeah, exactly. But that
since
goes back
most
to my
parents are
argument.
terrible parents in America, then we should we should make it so parents can't vote.
Right.
This goes
the
back to my
only
whole
people
argument.
who can vote are people who have at least $500,000 in student loan debt. That's what I think we should. That's how we should restrict the vote.
I mean, that's actually probably something somebody somewhere is drafting right now, as far as a legislative proposal goes.
Okay, well, moving on from
yes,
the
please.
voting thing. So what? Because I've had this conversation with Adam a lot. I've had this conversation with Sargon, with What If Alt Hist, and some other people.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about sort of? It seems like there's this rise of ethno-nationalism kind of spawning on the right at the moment.
I think that it depends on exactly what we're talking about. So if you're looking at a lot of this discussion is complicated by low birth rates, because you can point to like England or Scotland or Wales or Ireland and say like, yeah, I don't want the Irish population to be replaced. But and at the same time, it's true that there are a lot of immigrants being put in these countries when the people didn't vote for that. On the other hand, a huge part of why that has happened is because people have chosen not to have kids, which is something that I don't think the right is talking about or giving people as much agency for.
Mhm.
And so again, the United States is different from European countries in terms of like what our identity or ethnic makeup is. You've had
Right.
black people here for hundreds of years. You've had different white people from different parts of Europe. You've had Hispanics here since we conquered certain Spanish territories, natives. And so the discussion doesn't map on perfectly between Europe and the United States. But I'll just
Mhm.
be honest, when I'm looking at Ireland, it's like, no, dude, 100 years from now, I don't want Ireland to be like 100% populated by Somalian people and there are Irish people left, or Irish people are a minority. That's not, even though, like, yeah, I don't like the term or don't love the term ethno-nationalism because there's like a kind of ugliness you hear in it. If I'm being completely honest, I don't want to see that happen to Ireland. I don't want to see that happen to England. I don't want to see that happen to Germany. But again, a part of the problem is not just that the people's will has been ignored, even though they voted in many places to at least try to shut the border down, but because people didn't have kids.
Right.
People chose not to have families, which is like it's a very big problem. And I can get into, yeah, sorry, I'll let you go
Well,
because
let
I
me
can
just
say
say
a
that,
million things about this.
right. That, yeah, I agree that I mean, we do have to separate America from Europe or a lot of other, the rest of the world. It's a very different country. And I do kind of want to just focus really on America because the circumstances are very different. But just like on Europe or even America, I mean, I think you 100% can, I don't think you 100% can limit immigration to preserve a group or an identity or a culture without becoming an ethno-nationalist country. And I think most countries in modern history were not ethno-nationalist countries, and they still were limiting immigration for that purposes. So I don't think that those
So
things have to
all
go
right,
hand
that's
in
an interesting
hand.
distinction. I'm sorry, I don't mean
Where,
to interrupt you. Yeah.
well, so because when I say ethno-nationalism, what I'm talking about is the sort of the Nick Fuentes Royper idea of like there is this white there's this thing called white people in America that have a superior biological makeup that allows them to create prospering Western countries, and that non-white people, whether it be black or Hispanic or whatever, are not are inferior to for whatever reason, and that thus we should be limiting not just immigration, but we should be limiting voting rights, we should be limiting positions of power, we should be limiting the ability to run businesses to just this group of like white stock.
So yeah, again, if that's what they're saying, I certainly disagree with that. I believe every human on the planet is descended from two initial parents. I mean, as a Catholic, right?
Right.
One thing people don't know about the Catholic position, or a lot of people don't know, is even if you believe in evolution or theistic evolution, you still have to believe that there were two initial people, that all humans descended from Adam and Eve, and it's incoherent to believe that like there were two initial parents and we're all the same species, but there are higher and lower races. So no, I certainly don't believe that there are higher or lower races. And it was interesting because when you first said you can believe it's okay to preserve a people and preserve a culture without being ethno-nationalist, I was a little confused because I wasn't sure how you were distinguishing between the two things. But given the way you've laid out the definitions, yeah, I think it's terrible to say, oh, one group of people is genetically superior or something along those lines, and that's why other people shouldn't be let in. Whereas I do think it's a good thing to say it's all right to preserve our culture, it's all right to preserve our ethnic identity, it's all right to preserve our people, with the caveat added that people got to have kids. It's a sad thing. It's a
Mm-hmm.
sad thing to see these populations diminish. And to get a little back into the theology of it, one way you know that a group of people are blessed, biblically, is like they have a lot of kids. Like God, and sometimes there are good, wonderful people who don't have kids, but God blesses a nation by making that nation fertile, giving them the graces to be fertile, the will and desire. And it just seems that as we've become wealthy in the West, we've lost that desire. People have decided to go more for what was easy than to have larger families like they used to. And you
Mm-hmm.
can limit migration, but listen, if your birth rate goes below a certain level, it's like it doesn't matter how much you limit immigration, you're going to disappear.
Of course. Well, I guess to address the whole like protecting a people thing, and this is why I think there is a lot of utility in sort of your three levels of how things should be managed. I say like on a level two idea, and I think we should definitely orient ourselves towards this philosophically, is that I think any person can immigrate to any country and assimilate to that country's culture. And idealistically, countries, if they have a culture that we find moral, obviously, that those countries should be able to protect those cultures and their cultural identities. People like to use Japan because it's a very like clear example, I think, in a lot of Westerners' mind of like a very uniform cultured country that's different than our own. That people say, okay, like yeah, sure, they can protect their sort of identity of what it means to be Japanese. And theoretically, yes, you would hope that we can have a system where anyone can immigrate to Japan or any country and they could become, they could become part of that culture. They could become Japanese or whatever. Now, I know in America, it seems like on a more realistic level, America has a lot more cultural power, at least in the past, to assimilate different groups of people into a sort of American melting pot ideology, unlike, Japan or a lot of other countries. And I do understand on a more realistic level that there is an element where, yeah, if you allow mass immigration into a country, then there isn't going to be assimilation. And that's sort of, in my
Exactly.
mind, that's the problem. People aren't going to assimilate, especially if you allow mass immigration and people all group up in specific areas of the country. Like, I think it'd be very different if there was immigration into America or some other country, and there was actually like a law or a government system that intentionally spread everyone out so that there was a sort of a more forced assimilation going on, as opposed to just like, no, like now we have this like community that's just not really going to assimilate.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I will be honest. I think one thing we sort of overlook in these conversations is the degree to which immigration from Europe changed the United States. So when we have these conversations, people will say like, well, how can you oppose any immigrant ever entering your country for any reason when your ancestors were immigrants who entered America for a very specific reason at a very specific point in time for very different reasons? You're
Mm-hmm.
like, because it was for different reasons at a different time when our nation needed more infrastructure developed, etc. But even still, Irish immigrants, Italian immigrants, Polish immigrants massively changed the United States, like
Mm-hmm.
massively changed the United States. And so what a lot of lefties will do is they'll go, oh, well, people who are saying that too much Somalian immigration or South American immigration will change the US sound just like the people who said Catholics were going to change the US or Irish people were going to change the US. It's like, yeah, but they did. Like the the Irish did change the United States. The Italians did change the United States. These cultures all left a massive mark. And a lot of the same people on the left who will have you believe everyone just assimilates exactly to a country's values are at the same time loudly wondering, why were there so many Catholics on the Supreme Court bench to like get Roe overturned? It's like because of immigration from Catholic countries. That's why.
Mm.
And
Yeah, I guess it's
so we have to just be careful about like, again, who's coming and from where and what values you're spreading. That's why I agree with you that
right.
assimilation is an important thing if and when you can bring anyone in. But we also have to be clear about the fact that like we haven't really assimilated people as well as we've told ourselves that we have.
Well, I don't like on one hand, it definitely seems like that there was a much stronger idea in people immigrating to America, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, of like America is this good place and we need to
Mm,
move there and become American. I know
mm,
lots of people who they would say like, oh, if their grandparents came here, like they didn't even teach them whatever their native language is because they didn't want them to speak it. They wanted them to speak English because they're like, oh, fuck, the country I came from sucks. Like
I was just talking
we're
with someone
American
about
now.
that yesterday. Yeah, they like wouldn't even teach their kid the language.
Right, right. Now I'm sure now I've heard a lot of stories about that, and I'm sure there were definitely people, the Irish or the Polish or whatever that didn't have that idea, that were more like, oh, they wanted to retain some aspect of their culture. I guess it's hard for me to see, like, to delineate now, like, okay, like what is an element of American culture that is now become Irish,
Yeah,
Irishified, or
100%.
Catholicized, or something that would be like different from, I guess, the waspy culture that maybe it was more dominant back in the day, to sort of like give you like a good answer about like how much of these groups of people have assimilated into America, or how much of America has changed for the better or the worse for taking in these groups of people.
Well, and that's also why it was the reason why the changes were so successful is because these things did become American. Like the
Mm-hmm.
celebration of St. Patrick's Day, it's bigger in the United States than it is in Ireland. That was just one. I mean, that's one example, and it seems
People
like
just like to
maybe
get
even like
drunk.
a little bit of a trite example. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot that changed in this country in terms of our values and our beliefs that was a product of so much immigration from Catholic countries. For example, the Hayes Code. I mean, the power that Catholic bishops actually had to get their parishioners to boycott certain movies as a
Mm-hmm.
result of immigration from Catholic countries massively changed the landscape of what kind of films were made in the 20th century.
Interesting. Hmm. Yeah, that could be a good example. But going back to sort of to the ethno nationalist
Yeah, yeah,
perspective,
sure.
because it is weird to me and it's disturbing to me to see people like Fuentes and sort of the people that kind of circle around that, like Elijah Schaefer and all these other people who are very explicitly in certain audiences on this idea of like, no, like white people have some sort of genetic superiority to them.
Have they said that?
Yeah, yes,
Uh,
100%. I mean, I remember, I don't know if you remember, there was a couple years ago, Fuentes got into some trouble because he had some like speech that was on Rumble and it got taken down and everyone was arguing about it. And in that speech, I mean, he was going on about how there's the only white people can create Western democracies and how you need to prevent non-white people and Jews from owning businesses and being in government. And it's disturbing, I guess, to me to see, especially if Fuentes seems like I don't know what happened. Like this year, all of a sudden, he's like popping up all over the place now in more and more mainstream circles, and I don't really know why this is happening. And you go on X and you just see it's like the amount of racism and anti-Semitism just has exploded, and I don't know, how much of it's bots, how much of it is legitimate. I'm curious is that if whether this is concerning to you, how do you think this is like a thing? What's going on here?
Well, that's an interesting question because I think the last part you mentioned, it's unclear how much of this stuff is bots and how much of this is real.
Mm-hmm.
I think, again, insofar as anyone makes the claim that some group of people are genetically inferior, I think that's horrible and wrong, and that is concerning. I would also add that I think part of why you see an explosion in this kind of thing, if there is an explosion and it's not bots, because again, most of the people you meet in real life aren't saying these things. Again, is that because they're anonymous online so they can say more, or is that because bot farms are pushing this
Right.
stuff out? I don't know, but I will say is insofar as it's authentic, insofar as people are saying things like this, I think it's because for a very long time, the distinction that you made earlier is not a distinction that the establishment was willing to make. So you pointed out it's okay to love your people and want to preserve your culture and not want to be erased. And you can believe that without thinking that other people are inferior or not capable of the level of cognition that you are, et cetera, et cetera. So because any desire to like preserve or retain your culture was conflated with that second category of thinking other people are genetically inferior, it pushed some people over that edge. And it was like, well, if I believe this and then there's no cost to believing this because I'm already seen as the same kind of person. Or what also happens is like, well, I know it's okay for me to preserve my culture and they're lying about that. So like maybe they're lying about whether other people are inferior. I think that putting all of these people in one category together as if it's the same thing has actually done a lot of damage to the discourse, and it
Mm-hmm.
has opened the Overton window to some things that you and I would both consider concerning.
Yeah, no, I 100% think that the reason that white ethno-nationalism has increased is not only in response to what you're saying, but in response to the weaponization of race-based identity politics
Mm-hmm.
from the far left, especially because like if you have an environment where people are demonized because they're white or they're male, and people that are not white or not male are propped up or given some sort of extra privilege, like obviously white people are going to be like, what the fuck? Like, we need to now galvanize around our identity to
That's
protect
right.
ourselves. And, this is something I've been saying for, 8 years, 10 years, however long I've been on the internet. I've been, saying this, if you do this, this is going to be a response. It's the most obvious thing on the planet. So I definitely think that all that stuff created the situation we're in the first place. I don't know why. I just think it's just weird that specifically Fuentes has just been blowing up recently. And I'm not really sure like what should the right do to
Mm.
stop this, or should the right do anything to stop this?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak again to anyone blowing up or why they're getting the traction they're getting. I just think that listen, I think people should say what I'm saying. If someone makes the argument that people are inferior or bad, like if you hear someone say that another group of people are inferior on the basis of their genetics, yeah, you have to push back against that. You
Mm-hmm.
have to say, no, that's not true. And just line out or lay it all out there. It's okay to want to preserve your culture and preserve your people without thinking that any other group of people are like genetically inferior or anything along those lines. I would also add that, oh, hold on, I completely lost my train of thought here. Give me 2 seconds.
No problem.
Oh yeah, I would also add that one of the unfortunate realities of the momentum of history is it's really rare that things go really far in one direction without swinging all the way back to the other direction. So wherever we're going to be, we're not going to land in the center. I believe that we have been told forever and ever and ever, like, white people are bad, everyone else is good. The opposite narrative of that is going to be like, white people are good, everyone else is bad. Whereas, of course, what we should believe is it's okay to love your people. And to quote Chesterton, I think it was Chesterton, he said, like, nationalism is the understanding that the more that I as an Englishman love England, the more I realize why a Frenchman should love France. Like, the more I love my people, the more I should realize why other people love their people. And it shouldn't inspire hatred of any other group. I think that that's probably what should be maintained. And I think that that's the way we should talk about this. And I think that the people who actually are arguing that some groups of people are genetically inferior, I believe that that's a minority. And it's important, again, on the right to just maintain what I've said. If someone says something that seems off color to you, or that promotes the belief that someone's like inferior for their like immutable characteristics, just point out like, no, you know. And also it's helpful to point out that like that's kind of what the left wants you to say. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what people who are against our movement want to hear you saying, and you're taking the bait.
Well, it seems like a lot of this stuff is being conflated under, or like hidden, I would say, by some people, not everyone, under this label of Christian nationalism. So how do you feel about that label, and what does that even mean?
Yeah, it's so funny. I agree with you that a conflation happens there, because I have no idea what Christian nationalism means. It's a kind of like a political swear word that was thrown out there a couple of years ago. And this is something I've talked about with Tim before. But what the press will sometimes do is they'll create a term with a very specific ugly connotation that's made up of two smaller words that have more precise meanings. So like Christian nationalism. All right, I'm a Christian, and if I say I'm a nationalist at some point, then you can call me a Christian nationalist, and it's not libel, right? Because even though I don't use that phrase or whatever, well, he said, or like white nationalist. He's a white guy and he said he's a nationalist. He's technically a white nationalist. You can get away with these kinds of things. I think as far as Christian nationalism goes, like a belief in nationalism plus the belief in like Christianity, or that America's a Christian nation and was founded on Christian principles, is a good thing. Christian nationalism, as it's conflated with all of the things that you just mentioned, I think is a bad thing. But I also think to some degree it's a straw man. I think most Christians who believe in a strong national identity don't believe that other people or groups of people are inferior.
Yeah, I would imagine the overwhelming amount of Christians in America who are nationalists and then they favor America, don't fall into that camp. It seems like, and I think that's why it's interesting, because I have seen a lot of the press kind of do that thing you're talking about. Well, they'll kind of use this in a dishonest way to attack people that maybe don't deserve it. But then the flip side of that is that I've seen the white nationalists rebrand themselves as Christian nationalists. They've actually,
that's interesting.
They've taken the label, because obviously saying that you're like a Christian nationalist sounds better than saying you're a white nationalist.
And well, they also mean two different things, I guess. I'd have to look into that.
Should,
I'm not as familiar with that.
Yeah, they should. Because I mean, well, that's also like, what does it mean? Does it mean that you are in favor of a theocracy? Or, what does it mean to be a Christian nationalist?
This is also what's happened, though, for decades with the conversation in the U.S. about separation of church and state. So people will accuse you of like wanting to force your religious values onto them if you have any moral position that they think is associated with Christianity. So when you talk about abortion or really any other number of issues, people will be like, well, you're trying to force your religion onto me. And it's like, dude, I'm not trying to get a law passed that says you can't eat meat on Friday, right? The specific aspects of my religion that I'm called to by supernatural faith are not necessarily things that I'm trying to put into law. Like I believe that all the things I'm trying to put into law.
You said you were against gay marriage, though, and that's like a big ask.
Yes, I don't believe.
That's a big ask.
I don't. Well, again, I believe that marriage has a specific definition that I don't think anyone.
Yeah, but you're asking gay Americans not to engage in marriage.
I'm saying I won't call them married. I'm saying I won't call them a married
Oh,
couple because I don't
okay,
believe
well.
that they are. I don't
But I
believe
mean,
that they're
if
a
you're
married couple, and I
Wait,
don't
wait,
think
wait.
that we should have legal documents that say that they're married people. I don't believe it reflects truth. But
I-
I also
Mhm.
don't think you have to be Christian to believe that. I think nowadays it's primarily Christians who believe this, plus like, Orthodox Jews, Muslims, people from Abrahamic faiths, and even some people from non-Abrahamic faiths. But it's a very popular belief in the West today to believe
Mhm.
that marriage is not something that just exists between a man and a woman, but that's a more modern development.
Would you
And
be in favor
historically,
of a law that prohibits gay Americans from getting married?
I don't want to call them married, and I don't want them legislatively to be called married. I think that if you're talking about the legal precedent of like laws that would prevent two men from living together or something, I don't know how you would even regulate something like that. Like I don't know how you would investigate to see if two men were
The
gay. But if a country in yeah, sorry, I'll let
So
you.
it sounds like you would support a law that prohibited two gay Americans from getting married.
Yeah, I don't believe in gay marriage, dude. I think it's wrong. I
Okay,
think
well,
that
look,
in some cases,
I'm saying
yeah,
that
yeah.
is a
But
big
I
ask.
I
I'm
also
saying
just
that is
I
like
want
a
to express something here.
huge, that's a huge,
I
like,
want to finish fleshing my position out.
okay,
My
go ahead.
argument here, first and foremost, is that I won't call them a married couple. I don't believe that they're a married couple. When
Well,
you get into
it
the
doesn't
principle, you
matter.
gotta let me finish my point, man.
Okay. We're
When you
talking about the
get
state calling them a married couple, though. That's
yes,
completely different. Okay. You
yes.
call them
But
whatever
if
you want.
all right, let me call them whatever I like. I'm just
Okay,
finishing
go
my sentence
ahead.
here. So my position here is that if there's some country somewhere in the world where they say like we don't believe that people should be gay or our nation doesn't like that, if they're not punishing them in some like again, if you're murdering people or something, no, that's wrong. But a country saying like these aren't our values, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, or that
It
like the
is a
United States has
punishment.
to become. Hmm?
Well,
It
saying that
shouldn't
they
be.
can't get
I don't
married
think you
is
should
a
kill people. No,
punishment.
yeah. Wait, repeat that.
Saying they can't get married is a punishment. You're basically prohibiting them from doing what adults like to do. They like to get married. They like to spend their lives with someone that they love.
And again, I don't agree. Like this is, I think, where we're talking past each other. Is I literally don't believe it's possible for them to get married. I think it's possible for them to live together and say they're a married couple. I don't believe that they're married. I believe marriage is something different.
Well,
Okay.
I think part of the difficulty with these issues is obviously, again, we live in democracy. People vote on what policies they want. And people are going to vote based on, I think, mostly their moral intuitions or whatever they believe is moral. And so if a person is religious, they're going to be voting based on those moral ideas. And like you can't take that away from someone,
Yeah.
obviously. And there's nothing inherently wrong with anyone doing that or voting in that fashion. And that wouldn't make a country like a theocracy or a Christian nationalist country or whatever. People are simply, individually voting based on their moral situations or the moral beliefs. I guess the problem is then, or the difficulty, I should say, then is it gets a little sticky when if people are voting based on a religious value, which would theoretically strip an individual's rights away, and the justification for it seems only to be primarily seems to be on a religious value. I think it can be difficult for a country that is a country where there is supposed to be, at least I would say there is supposed to be a separation of church and state in the law. That like, how does the law make that justification at that point?
Yeah, I think where we disagree is that it's a specifically religious position to believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. I think obviously all throughout history, people have engaged in homosexual acts. There's no debate about that. I mean, that's even discussed in the Bible. We know that that's always happened throughout history.
Mhm.
They have not always been referred to as marriages. The idea that it's a marriage, the same as when a man and woman get together, and then society historically has been able to reliably predict that these people would produce children together. It's a
Well,
totally different thing. And
sure, right.
I believe marriage is a special label, and
Mhm.
I don't believe it should be given to unions that aren't marriages, including unions, by the way, between heterosexual people that I wouldn't consider to be marriages.
We have
Like a
this guy.
heterosexual throuple.
We have this guy in our community, this guy Ace, and he's totally gay. He wants to get gay married so badly. How can we say no? How can we tell
Well,
him
wait,
no?
wait.
He can't
Well,
fulfill
I'm
his
happy to answer.
lifelong dream of being gay married.
I'll say this. I think that Ace is not someone that I've ever spoken to before, but given
But
that
he's a
he's a fan
nice
of your
guy.
and given he's a fan of your show, I'm sure he's a really cool guy. And if he's watching right now, what I would
He
say
is.
is, what I would say is, God loves you, and I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you you're married if you're not married. In the same way that if you knew someone who was trans-identified and they were a man saying they were a woman, even if you deeply cared for this person, you would say, I'm not going to play along with that because I don't think it's good for you.
Well, look,
That's a completely
different issue.
But I disagree. I disagree that it's a different issue. I think it's a confusion about the roles that the sexes have respectively. And so I'm sure Ace has many awesome qualities in many ways, but that doesn't
Mostly
mean
that he's gay. That's the only thing.
That doesn't mean I can tell him something that is false. And it doesn't mean that I can tell him something that is false.
Well, there's two things. And first of all, Ace is not actually gay. Adam was just trolling Ace.
You're such an asshole, did you say that?
Why,
it was a legitimate question, but he was just trolling Ace.
Why would you say that?
Actually, hold on. That's
first
really,
first
really
of
funny.
all, Sitch does not know if Ace is not gay. So
I'm assuming he's never said he's gay. Okay.
That's so mean, bro.
It's very mean.
Did you just say that?
It did. But it was funny.
Well,
okay,
look, we have other people in our community, I believe, are gay married.
And I would say the same thing to all of them. If you're not going to rug pull me again, I would say the same thing to all of them. I'm sure they're cool people in many ways. It does not come from a place of not liking them as a person or any anger or hatred towards them. It comes from the same place as me not wanting to call like a quote unquote trans woman a woman. I just don't believe it's true.
Right. Well, the thing I want to ask was like kind of without getting into a specific issue about gay marriage or abortion. I guess the question I wanted to ask you was, is it important to you that like laws that are passed have a non-religious justification to them?
I mean, I think that's a really good question. Again, I've mentioned it's good to err on the side of the status quo. The way the United States exists and the way the United States is set up today, we don't have religious justifications for our laws. Again, as a religious person, I don't think it's bad to have a religious justification for a law. When I'm having conversations with non-religious people, I want to make sure I'm meeting people where they're at and I'm explaining things in a way that is going to make sense, right? Because I don't believe God makes stupid rules. I think his rules map onto reality. So I explain it at the level of logic instead of explaining why I have my system of logic. I believe God made the universe. I believe God made morality, etc. So I'm not against the idea of legislation having religious elements to it, but I don't believe, if what you're asking is like, do I think we should pass a law that says like every American is forced to go to mass on Sunday and like they're not allowed to eat meat on Friday, or I would not make the argument that someone should be forced legislatively to be part of a specific religion. And I don't think that would be a good law. I think it would be a bad thing. I don't think you can force somebody into that anyway. I don't think you can like force someone to have a relationship with God. But I think you can, for the in the service of the greater good of all of society, prohibit things that are bad, like abortion. And I think we're obligated to, and I don't think you have to make a religious argument to restrict that.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, we've been talking for 2 hours. I don't know how much time you have because I don't want to keep you.
I've got like a couple more minutes, but we can keep chatting.
Hey, look, and we've been super argumentative, but obviously it's all in good fun. I hope.
Yeah, no, dude, I actually appreciate this, and I know that you guys do this. Like, you have guests on and you flesh out your ideas.
Look, we disagree.
It's been very friendly.
Yeah, it's no big deal. Look.
Yeah, I like having the opportunity to flesh some of this stuff out, and everything I was saying too about the relationship between rights and duties, these have been things I've wanted to talk about on shows, but mostly when I go on air with people, the conversation is about current events, which is fine. Yes. I don't mind current events, but I want to talk about this stuff. So I actually appreciate the challenge.
Yeah, we talk about it all. Look, we go on and on for hours and hours.
That's why I wanted to do that. That was one of the reasons I wanted to do your show again, is because I actually want to get down to the bedrock, because to me, that's more interesting than the current news cycle.
It's hard for me because I don't really want to have that religious debate, because like I said, I'm an atheist for Jesus. Like, I'm technically not a believer, but I think the Christian religious system is a good system that makes people live better lives. So I don't want to
here's
take
my
the side.
Let me ask. Here's a religious question that I want to ask you. And it kind of it's somewhat related to the whole, I agree that there are certain situations where monarchy or some other government system would be useful or even necessary, depending on the circumstances that people are living. Because I've always looked at it from the perspective of, I don't think there is a universal system of living that's going to work for all people in all situations. And I would also equate this rather heretically to like ancient people in the Bible. I would think that God, who has infinite knowledge, would have an awareness of like, okay, God can't necessarily be like, here's the best way to live from our standard to people 5,000 years ago. And so, does it make sense to have the perspective of, well, all the rules that were put down for these, cave people 5,000 years ago are all going to be applicable in modern times?
And that's a really, really good question, actually. And the answer is twofold. In some cases, no. In some cases, yes. So as Catholics, we believe that the old covenant was fulfilled and there's a new covenant. So there's certain laws in the Old Testament about, mixing fabrics or eating shellfish that we're no longer bound by, but we're still bound by like the natural law or the moral law. So the Ten Commandments, for example. The Ten Commandments were not like part of God's specific agreement with the Israelites as his chosen people. The Ten Commandments were universal moral norms. And they're also norms that have existed in most cultures historically. Like, even though they've been violated, most cultures had something kind of similar. Like, yeah, you can't kill people, you can't steal things, you can't commit adultery, etc. So the moral laws that were like specifically tied to the old covenant, I believe, were fulfilled. But when it comes to the Ten Commandments, when it comes to natural law, I believe all of that still applies today.
Now, is this because I'm not like super knowledgeable about Christian theology? Is this something that's like fleshed out like very specifically, or is this something that's argued and interpreted by all the different Christian scholars?
Oh,
Just
good
like
question about which rules still carry over
like what do
today.
you still
Yeah.
follow?
Oh,
What do
yeah.
you not follow?
It's totally fleshed out. And actually, so if you want, there are a lot of resources that the Catholic Church provides publicly about its own magisterium. So what we believe as Catholics is that when the church adds to these teaching documents, there's like varying levels of authority, but they're all relevant to what we believe about moral issues. And often it's just like, how do we apply this age-old understanding of right and wrong to the modern day? So let me give you an example of this. Like with thou shalt not steal. The Bible doesn't say explicitly that it's a sin to commit Bitcoin fraud, but like we know the Bible says thou shalt not steal. And so if there's ever an argument over whether Bitcoin fraud is theft or something like that, the church could issue a teaching document. A pope could write an encyclical if it really becomes a hot enough issue, like why Bitcoin theft is, a sin. But that's not the church coming up with a new rule. It's like the church clarifying what we've already believed or what we've always taught. And so a lot of what the Catholic Church says definitively about different economic issues, for example, are an application of things you find in the Bible, like not being able to, defraud a laborer of his day's wages or not stealing, to a modern economy and saying like, hey, after the Industrial Revolution with capitalism developing, here are some ways that people are stealing that might not be recognized as stealing, etc. But like, even though you inherently have to use modern terms to describe modern things, it's referencing age-old morality. It's referencing things from the Bible. It's referencing the Ten Commandments.
Okay, interesting. Actual Justice Warrior, hey Sean, the other Sean, or I guess you're Seamus, not really Sean.
Hey,
says,
AJW.
Yes, he says, "Hey Seamus, is here a fellow buddy? Ask Seamus if he cleaned his sink before he threw it at Jank's nephew. He knows what I mean."
we did a cartoon recently on Hassan Piker and his shocking treatment of animals.
Oh yes,
I saw it. It was very funny.
Thank you, dude. It was. Do you want to know? I think I got my favorite criticism of my entire career from that video.
Oh, what was that?
I guess at one point when I was improvising and riffing, I called Kaya a boy, and I guess Kaya's a girl.
You did, yes. I saw that.
And so one retweet I got on the Twitter version was, pretending to care about a dog when you don't even know their gender is wild.
Oh, wow.
They should have said when you're misgendering the dog. That would have been like a little cherry on top.
I know. Yeah. I was like, that's it. That's it. I will never, no one will ever criticize me with a funnier criticism I just don't think it's going to happen.
Right.
They're massive coping. So that's what that's all about.
I know. It's like, and I'm sure you guys are on the same page with me here, but with all the horrible things he said over the years, listen, I think the way he treats
yeah.
that dog is awful. But I just think if you say America deserved 9/11, that should probably destroy your career, you know, first and foremost. It took this. It's just wild. You think all the ways, all the times he's called for violence in Minecraft, and it's like, but this is
Mhm.
the thing that's finally actually potentially getting him canceled.
Yeah, it is a bit offensive, but I don't. This isn't actually going to get him canceled, which is even more
Probably
offensive.
not.
So yeah,
Yeah, probably
Mhm.
not. Listen, dude, and I was saying this on Timcast yesterday. Like, people can go back and forth about the particular. I don't know anything about dogs or raising them, so people can go back and forth about like the specific method of discipline. But I think even if you don't know much about animals, there's clearly something sick and wrong about forcing a dog to like sit in place for 9 hours while you
oh
Yeah,
train.
hell yeah,
That's
of
an insane
course,
thing to do to an animal. That's an
of
insane thing to
course.
do to an animal.
totally insane.
Yeah, if you had a shock collar on because the dog keeps jumping on people or keeps getting out of your yard and you're worried it's going to get hit or lost something, that's very different than you need to be in this exact frame location on my stream at all times.
Dude,
That's
Yeah,
the
man,
problem. Yeah,
that's so insane, bro. That's such a crazy thing to do to an animal.
it
That's such a
is.
crazy thing to do to an animal. It's like, you're
And I don't
forced to
think
sit
anyone
here.
would even care. Like if people would be fine with seeing the dog, move around in the background, they would probably like that more. It's so strange.
Yeah, I don't know why he wants that. It's a very bizarre
Yeah.
thing. There's clearly something about his appearance that's like that he needs to be very particular about it or something. If he's
Hmm.
so anal to the point where like the dog has to be behind me and I'm gonna electrocute it if it moves, there's some insecurity there about the way things have to look.
Right. Right.
No,
Squeeze her, I hardly Louise her for $5 says, "Hey Seamus, you should make one of your shorts about some Mormons who start trying to steal cars to give to homeless people. That would be funny."
gosh, that's hilarious. I don't know if Mormons would be the ones to do it. This is the funny thing. Obviously, I'm not Mormon. I know Mormons. They're such nice people, man. And I know it's cliche to say it, but every Mormon I've ever worked with or known, they were just so kind.
Hmm.
I did that as a short film. It's called Carjackers for Jesus, but it was actually
Oh,
it
is that like
wasn't. It was
they were like joking on your
Jehovah's
were they
Witnesses.
trolling?
No, I don't think they know about the short film. So I think they were
That's
giving
hilarious.
you a legitimate idea for a
Hmm.
short. So
Then I would have done it and Adam would have sued me.
no, no, I would
I mean,
not.
Mormons really have
I don't care.
they have their incentives lined up, right? I mean, you get to be God of your own planet. That's pretty base, right? Get a
But there's
harem.
also like there's just clearly, and I gotta think it's not that. There's just something they're clearly doing right as a group of people
Hmm.
that I'm like, it has to transcend the parts of their, because other people, by the way, there have been other people who've lived really good lives and had these big beautiful families and been wholesome people without believing they'd become God. But there is just, yeah, it's important when people, even when people you disagree with are doing something really well, you got to figure out like, what
Yeah.
are they doing right?
Well,
Like, what are they
that's
doing
like
right? And yeah,
I don't know if you've seen it. The South Park episode about that is very
yes,
funny. And yeah, correct, because they kind of go over all the crazy stuff, but then they're like, well, they're having a lot of good outcomes, so maybe it's fine.
yeah. Well, that's another fascinating thing too, is like the degree to which story influences behavior, the degree to which the things we believe make us behave in certain ways.
Right.
Obviously, Adam knows about this as a writer.
What's that?
Mhm.
The degree to which the stories you know or have been told or listened to influence your actual behavior in real life, influence your actual beliefs.
Oh, of course, yeah, yes.
We were talking about that in the case of Mormonism, and it's just interesting because I'm fascinated by this, and I want to pick out like what there's clearly something they're doing right, and I don't think their story is right. Obviously, I'm not Mormon. I think they're wrong
Mhm.
about a number of things in some really big ways, but there's like something that they believe, and I suspect it's a belief that I share. I suspect it's something we both believe, but that they're like promoting in a way that other people aren't, and I'm like I've been
They're
trying to pick
against
that up.
birth control. Mormons are against any form of birth control. So that's how they get their
And
numbers up.
well, so are Catholics, but how many Catholics follow that teaching today,
Are
right?
they
There's
really?
a
I
no,
didn't
yeah,
know
yeah.
that. You
There's
can't
like
even
a
use condoms? You're not allowed to use condoms?
no artificial contraceptive methods.
Can
But
you do
Really?
but a
the
lot of
pull out?
Catholics,
Is that artificial?
unfortunately,
Pull
no,
out.
none of that. Your
Oh
sex is supposed
God.
to be
You're not
unitive and
allowed to
procreative.
pull out? Oh
No,
shit.
no,
Can you? What about timing? Can you be like, well, listen, it's right after the
no.
period. I'm pretty sure it's safe.
If something happens on accident, you know what I mean? Like, but if by
I
timing we
accidentally
mean
had sex on a day where she wasn't ovulating.
Oh, that's interesting. So yeah, I mean, for like grave moral reasons, you are
Hmm.
allowed to do that
Right.
because you're not technically like cutting off God's plan. So if I
Wow.
could draw an analogy here, right? The purpose of eating is to fuel your metabolism. It's for
Right.
nutrition. Um, but it also is pleasurable. You enjoy your food.
Hmm.
Similarly, the purpose of sex is procreation and unity with your spouse, but it's also like enjoyable, right? You still enjoy it. So if someone's eating food and they like vomit their food back up, they got the enjoyment out of it, but they're clearly not behaving in accordance with nature, and it's not healthy for them. And with sex, it should feel good, but again, if you're blocking the actual purpose of the act,
Hmm.
it becomes immoral. And so that's the Catholic position on contraceptives. Because
Interesting.
because God wants you to be maximally happy. He wants you to be in heaven. He gave you this gift and this is the proper use of it. So when it comes to timing, like you asked, timing doesn't necessarily the timing thing is almost more akin to like going on a diet than being bulimic, right? Because you're not interrupting the sex, you're not stopping it from being procreative. You're just kind of doing it in times and ways where maybe you don't have a child in the same way that you like might eat in times and ways where you don't gain weight, but you don't necessarily having an eating disorder or something.
Hmm.
But that said, like that can still be abused. Someone can diet in a way that's bad for them because they think they're bigger than they are and they're not bulimic, but they're still not eating enough. Similarly, someone can use what we call NFP or natural family planning, which is what you described. People can use
Hmm.
that in an illicit way where it's like they have a contraceptive mentality and instead of trusting God and being open to life, they're like, well, I want like another vacation house or something, as opposed to like a real serious reason, like a health reason or like a real financial reason with anxiety about not being able to take care of your kids or something like that.
So to be clear, so you're saying that like if you were to do timing would be fine unless you're intentionally doing timing not to have children, then that would be bad.
No, 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 no. You can do timing in both directions. Firstly, people use it to
Okay.
get pregnant, but if
Yes.
you have a grave moral reason, like if you have a serious moral reason why you can't have kids at a particular moment, you are able
They're
to
just like, I
time
got
it.
too many kids. I got 2 kids. I got 3 kids. I'm fine. You
It
know.
depends. Well, that wouldn't. It depends. That wouldn't
Mm.
necessarily be a reason because if you're like able to take care of your family, then I don't think that would be considered a reason. A lot of this comes down to like prudential judgments, so it's difficult for me to give one overarching rule and be like,
I
this is when
understand. I
you are,
understand.
this is when you aren't able to. Like with birth control or like with artificial contraceptives, we're not allowed to use those to prevent conception or anything like that. With NFP, there are certain circumstances. I just want to be
Mm.
careful about giving like definitive yes or
Gotcha.
no answers because everyone's circumstance is different. But like an example would be like we are certain that if we have another kid, they're going to starve, like something like that. Or like my wife has a serious health issue, and if she gets pregnant right now, it could really do serious damage to her body, like stuff like that, where it's not just like I don't want this or I'm not comfortable with this, and it's more to do with this would actually be bad for my family. Like this would legitimately hurt my children or my wife.
Okay.
Are
Renor
are
Renor
oh, what are you gonna?
Renor
Are
Zorro's here for
hills?
$5. Says, as a Catholic, why does Seamus think? What does Seamus think of the Catholic monarchy right wing movement?
I mean, I feel like we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier,
Hmm.
where I don't. Again, I think monarchy is in principle good, but I think there's a lot of systems that work, and there isn't one system that works everywhere. So I think if you're saying like, oh, we want to turn the United States into a monarchy, I think that's a little bit of a LARP, but I also don't think a Catholic monarchy is a bad thing. I think there are countries historically that have been Catholic monarchies where it's been a beautiful thing. And obviously when the system collapses, people are going to build the exact thing I want them to build
Of
and it's going to
course.
be perfect. So like once the United States collapses in some small parts of the US, it could be great, but I just don't think it's maybe I
Hmm.
don't know enough about the movement specifically. I've heard Catholics talk about monarchy, and I would suspect many of them share my beliefs where it's like, in principle, it's good, but let's be real about what is actually going to happen here.
You would
Hmm.
But
prefer
I
a
don't know. Is
Catholic
there like,
monarchy over a democracy?
if I could like, well, again, I don't think that would work in the United States, but if I could move, if there, I love America, but if there was like, if there's a Catholic country, a small Catholic country with a monarchy, I think that that's a beautiful thing. I would
If you
have to like,
had to
I
move,
would,
you'd be like, that's where I'm moving.
yeah, if I had to. Also, though, I like again, this gets into what we were saying earlier. A lot of it depends on like, are the people here actually Catholic, or is this like it's imposed in the same way that, you know, Afghanistan had democracy. But so when people talk about this Catholic monarchist movement, what are they saying? Are they saying essentially what I'm saying, that like it can work or, in practice in certain ways, or are they saying like we need to turn the United States into a monarchy?
Right.
Because the United States, listen, a monarchy that big, I think at that point you're kind of just talking about an empire. Like the United States is huge. I think people underestimate, like when we have these conversations too, people forget that the kinds of systems of government that you can have in smaller countries, like it doesn't map onto a country as huge as the United States. And yeah, I'll leave it. I mean, I don't want to get into like the whole argument about democracy again, but you can even make arguments that like I think it becomes very difficult for anything to work at a scale this large, and that includes democracy. I think it's very difficult to get people on board with one unified project when they live so far away from each other and have such different lives. But that's why it's also good that like we have the electoral college, and we have sort of we have these checks and balances built in that balance that out a little bit.
Become the Knight for $10 says, thank you, Seamus, for repping Catholics on Sitch and Adam today.
Oh, happy to, brother. I hope I did a good job. I
mean, better than us.
I enjoyed
very
it.
Good at
Yeah.
repping Catholics.
I'm no theologian, so I just try to be careful. Like I'm not a theologian at all.
Gypsy Harlow for $5 says, advocating for monarchy will always be more gay. Checkmate, Seamus. Down with the king. Long live the cowboy. Well,
you know what? Good sir, you've made an assertion, but I see no evidence for it. I see no evidence.
Alex Puente, thanks so much for the 21 months. Says, one of my favorite Catholic content creators, but too bad he's Irish.
Oh, no, I get that a lot. That actually really upsets people.
Why do people
like,
not like that?
That's so bigoted.
It's unfortunate, but it just is what it is. Well, there's this whole thing where in Ireland, you know, the people born there, they get really mad when they hear Americans call themselves Irish. Like, you can't call yourself Irish. You weren't born here. And it's like, dude, do you think we're bragging? It's like an admission. All right. No one's taking your street cred, bro. We're letting them know that like we might be too loud or drink too much.
Okay. Our Hiltzer for 2 hours says people need to be asking the IQ, the Irish question.
Listen, dude, if there was something to call the Irish question, it would not be the IQ. All right, I'm sorry to tell you. There's got to be a better way to label that.
Caleb for $10 says American culture is just relentless self-reinvention. It is indeed a quote idea, whether people like that or not. They did not create a union based on race or religion because it would have been impossible.
I mean, yeah, I'm actually, Adam, what do you have to think about that? Because that's.
I agree. I agree.
But so the idea is self-recreation? Can you explain? Can you read that again?
American culture is just relentless self-reinvention.
Yep.
Yeah, what does endless self-reinvention mean? Because at that point you just don't. The reason I disagree, and by the way,
we went from slavery to the civil rights movement. Of course, that's complete.
But is that reinvention?
Yeah, definitely.
Let's look at the abolition of slavery.
Reinvention.
So here's why I disagree. I believe that when the Constitution and the Bill of Rights were ratified, we were in a landscape where you had to get the 13 colonies to agree on something. So obviously you could not explicitly write in that document like slavery is bad, because then no one would have agreed that it should be the law of the land. And a certain level of pragmatism was needed. And of course, there were founders who were pro-slavery. I think if like a straightforward reading of our founding texts is not pro-slavery. And I think that's part of why legislatively the arguments were easier to make later on that we're not a pro-slavery country. The hurdle actually, Adam, was democracy, because slave owners wanted to vote a certain way.
It's interesting that you focus on the text of the document. I would focus more on just the cultural norms. And I do like, obviously the cultural norms during the times of slavery were just vastly different. So
that's true, but there was still plenty of people who were against slavery.
We went through Prohibition. We've had huge like revivalist movements in the United States. I mean, the United States is just a churning, changing culture. And I would argue that's one of the reasons why America is as successful as it is because we have enough dynamism that we're really constantly changing. We're constantly ahead of the curve technologically and culturally.
There are some changes that we've had that I agree with you, like abolishing slavery. Fantastic change, 0 notes. But I think that that's a
notes.
change. Yeah. I think that that's a change in line with the foundational text of this country as written. That said, you're right. There just have been certain changes, and again, I agree some of them are good. But I think any nation and any culture goes through changes. So I would say, like, saying that the change aspect is what American identity is made of doesn't sit right with me. I'd have to think about it more, but it just doesn't sit right with me, because if your culture is changed, then I don't know if there is any culture there.
It makes sense that you're a conservative, because from the conservative perspective, you want some sort of tradition that's ever present. So it makes sense that this would just object to you on an intuitional level.
Exactly. And I think I can make an argument here that might persuade you. So would you support a change to the Bill of Rights if someone's like, you know what, this First Amendment thing, let's get rid of it? Would you say, well, like, change is the nature of our country? Or would you go like, no, that's not American, just because it's changed?
If we wanted to include marriage equality in the Bill of Rights, I would totally support that.
Right. Agreed. Yeah.
Let me be the
agree to disagree. Treat all marriages equally. Yes. The real ones.
You were the one that said we should change the Bill of Rights. So
no. I don't think we should change it. But this is my point: is I don't think we should change it. Like, there are clearly certain things that we don't believe in changing, and the things that you don't believe in changing are your culture. No. Mm-hmm. So it would be a contradiction to say we are a culture of change.
I think it's important.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so if I Google relentless self-reinvention, because I'm not exactly sure what that means, and this is what AI tells me, and since I'm in 2025, I have to listen to the robots. It says it's the perpetual process of transforming one's identity, personality, or life circumstances driven by a persistent feeling of dissatisfaction or need for change. So I would say that I do think that is present in American culture, and definitely seems has always been present in terms of people like, that was like kind of the whole thing of going to America. We need change. We don't like where we're living. And then it was, we need to go out west. It's better out there. We need to kind of like do our own thing. So I would definitely say that's part of it. I think it could be maybe even a large part of it. I wouldn't say that's all it is. Exactly. And where I would agree with you is that I think, I think part of what makes America unique is that America was a country founded on very libertarian ideas about individuality and individual rights. And I don't think that that's going to change or should change. And I don't think just because we've had the idea of continually reinventing that we should get rid of everything, including those ideals.
Totally agreed. And I agree. There is that undercurrent there, for better or for worse. It's led America to take some risks and do some things that other countries probably wouldn't, that have turned out very well. It's also pushed us in the direction of changing things that I don't think were changes for the better. But right. At the very least, the super chatter is on the pulse of that fact, that ethos is alive and well in our country.
Look, yeah. I do agree there are obviously things that are fundamental to a society that probably shouldn't be changed. But even in the case of prohibition,
like marriage, kind of.
Yeah, marriage. Obviously, it's a buddy system. Everyone wants a buddy. In the case of prohibition, obviously the change was detrimental to society, and we changed it back. But I think that goes more to the super chatters idea that we're relentlessly changing the culture. Like, we changed the culture for a little bit to make alcohol illegal. It didn't work out, so we changed it back again. And even those, I bet
Irish immigration probably dropped to 0 at that time. They were like, "We're not going."
There's
just no way. And then they needed the labor, so
Did you know that
we have to end prohibition?
You know that the prohibition movement was a progressive movement. That it was actually progressives. Yeah, most progressives don't know that.
Progressive women's movement.
Yep.
And I'll be honest, I'm the last person who's going to make a pro-prohibition argument, but like part of me gets it just because.
I was going to say, aren't you in favor of some sort of temperance movement?
Mm-hmm. No. Well, So firstly, I think the Catholic and Protestant view of alcohol is generally different. And there's a number of Protestants who probably agree with me on this, actually, but some don't. Like, there's some Protestants who are just completely anti-alcohol. I disagree. I mean, Christ turned water into wine, right? We believe alcohol is a good thing when done in moderation. That said, a lot of immigrants. The United States had a level of water.
Oh my God!
Well, the level of prosperity. The level of prosperity, and this is just me talking out my butt here, but if I have to guess, the level of prosperity that a lot of new immigrants who came to the Americas were experiencing, or the amount of wealth that we built up as a nation that made things like alcohol so accessible, and probably more accessible to people than it had been at any other point in their lives, probably did lead to significant temperance issues. It's been a while since I looked at this, but I was talking with someone a while ago about like the statistics that you had with the number of men who would just go spend their paycheck at the bar right after they got paid. And I get why, the number of women who were beat by their husbands. I do get why they want, I'm serious. Like, I get why they wanted to push for an anti-alcohol movement. I just don't think it was a good thing. I don't think prohibition was a good thing. But what I'm saying is we look at it and we go like, what a silly thing. But it's like, I feel like if you were alive back then, you probably would understand why they wanted it.
Even that shows the relentless change in America. There was a time in America where people openly got drunk at work every day. Like you were just doing shots of whiskey.
And if you work from home, you still can.
And you were working on, look, those people were working on the railroad and shit.
No, I know. I'm kidding. That's wild. That's no, you're right though. It was something that was much more normal.
Yeah,
crazy.
I do like that ancient Jews were such winos that Jesus' first miracle was just making a bunch of alcohol for everybody.
Well, it's interesting because the bridegroom, he ran out of wine, which would look really bad. There's there's so much in the theology behind the Gospel of St. John's beautiful. And there's like a really good talk I was listening to not long ago about like all of the theological reasons why it was turning water into wine. But it's interesting because one thing that particular passage points out is that normally what people do is they serve the good wine first. And then once people have had enough of that to maybe not notice certain things, then they serve bad wine.
They get out the bad stuff.
Yeah, exactly. They get out the bad stuff.
Yeah.
And then what Christ does is the opposite. When he turns the water to wine, it's like the best wine these people have ever had. So he gives the best wine last. But another reason this is important, just for when arguing with anyone who says, it was grape juice, because I've heard it's a minority view, but I've heard some small number of evangelicals make that argument. Like, good grape juice doesn't make you not be able to taste bad grape juice, like that's for sure an alcohol thing. You have a certain amount of alcohol and then you stop noticing quite as much how things taste. Some of your senses aren't as sharp, but yeah, anyway, sorry. Getting off on a tangent.
No, it's an interesting.
Are we done? I don't, Seamus has to go, or you said
I gotta
jump.
Yeah, I just want to talk. Before I run, I just want to say a thing or two about what I'm working on before I
go for it.
So, as mentioned earlier, I believe the stories that we're told, the stories that we believe, shape us. And for a long time, our stories have been told by people who have contempt for us as Americans, for our values. I have been making these short animated cartoons for 10 years, and I've got a really, really awesome team. And so I believe we're ready to step out and start making longer form content. My hope and my dream is that we're going to be able to start making shows and even movies eventually. And so the first thing we're biting off here is a full-length animated show, 22 to 25-minute long episodes in that ballpark. And the first episode is really funny. We've been getting a lot of great feedback from it. If you guys go to twistedplots.com and support, you'll be able to watch it. But we've had an amazing amount of success so far. Again, we're like 44% funded after our first week, which is, just a massively generous outpouring. And if you guys want to see media, like if you're conservative and you want to see media that represents your values, not through preaching or monologues, but through good storytelling that just makes you think. Or if you're not even conservative, but you're just exhausted with all the really preachy, over-the-top, far-left stuff, and you want to see entertainment that puts the story and the comedy first instead of trying to preach at you and has a message which is different and isn't the same as what you're going to get from mainstream television, please go over to twistedplots.com, support the show, and every donation sends the message that people want grassroots, independent content that doesn't talk down to them and that isn't made by people who have contempt for them and their way of life.
You said it was twistedplots.com. I'll drop it in the...
Thank you so much.
It forwarded to freedomtunes.com/twistedplots, but that's fine.
Yes. So that's the forwarding point.
I'll put a link in the description as well too. So
yeah. So twistedplots.com, and it takes you to a portal that brings you to our GoFundMe page, basically.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Nice,
I'm sorry, Give Send Go, not GoFundMe. My mistake. My mistake.
How dare you?
I know. But guys, listen, it's been way too long. I want to do this again. I had a great time. We should flesh some of this out.
Yeah.
Adam, if you ever want to do an abortion debate or anything, yeah.
People get super triggered when we argue. I'm like, geez, these fucking snowflakes. Jesus Christ, we're just talking here.
I'm okay with
chill out.
I'm okay with pushback and with argument, man. I
know,
enjoyed...
me too. Look, I don't feel hurt or wounded or anything. So, and I don't think you do either. So,
no, I don't know. I'm deeply wounded, Adam.
Oh, okay. Well, forgive me.
Sitch, I can't believe what Sitch did to me. It was awful.
You're obligated. You're a Christian. You're obligated to.
We're gonna get you the shot collar
next
time you come on. So.
Adam needs the shot collar if he disagrees with me. And then we're gonna tell people on stream it wasn't a shot collar.
I swear it's not a shot collar.
It just vibrates.
But listen, man, I would love to come on to discuss ideas more at some even before we had the crowdfunding campaign. I'd like to come on, but maybe after the campaign's over, like a couple months from now.
Yeah, sure. You're welcome.
When I have a little more time, we could do an abortion debate. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Sure, I'm
serious.
It.
I wanted to talk about that.
You're way too smart to be pro-life.
You can't take my backhanded compliment. It was my, but in all
that's what a compliment sounds like. Oh, my mistake. I didn't realize.
No, I'm being a little facetious here. I actually do think you're a smart guy, and that is why I think you're too smart to be pro abortion.
Thank you.
We'll flesh it out further. We'll have a conversation. Yes. And then maybe we can talk like religion and stuff too, because I was curious, Sitch, about the stuff you were saying. And
sure.
Adam, obviously you're
a dirty atheist.
Atheist. I don't like to have those debates, obviously, because I don't mind people being religious. I don't want to talk people out of their religious beliefs. I mean, if they wander out of their religious beliefs of their own volition, I got no problem with that either. So, but anyway, you said you got to go. I don't.
Yeah, I had a blast. We should set a couple things up for the future just to talk about some of these things, debate the abortion issue, and again, I'll probably be back like before the campaign ends.
Okay, sure.
If you guys will have me, of course.
Yeah, reach out. No, it was a great show. People loved having you. So
awesome. God bless you guys. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Take care, man. All right.
Okay, let me go to the top here.
Go to the top.
Girl Sarah for 42 months. The secret number. Thank you so much. Says Trump is not cute and funny. He is a damn brat and he must be punished. Angry face.
Wow, that's shots fired at Sammy G.
I think it was somewhat sarcastic considering the angry face, but emoji. Okay. But there you go. Noel Screaming the Void for 2 hours says Orson Scott Card. Thank you. Oh, is that in terms of like conservative media?
Did you not do? I was trying to do Our Hills Hurts.
But we can get. You can read it. Yeah,
did it.
We didn't get to that.
No, we got to do it when Seamus is here.
I know.
Our hilts hurt for $5. Seamus. Adam was only triggered because he's in the closet. Be patient with him. His wife doesn't know.
True. Right?
No, of course.
She doesn't know?
Yeah. Of course my wife knows I'm gay.
Oh,
what are you talking about? No.
We're in LA. I assume
obviously
all guys
I'm not
like
gay.
Bisexual or gay, so right. But yeah, no, Orson Scott Card, writer of Ender's Game, very interesting guy. Very nice guy. I went to a writing conference with him. He seemed very cool. It was
really? Oh,
but
yeah,
it was like
terrible
to be there because it was a Mormon college and they didn't have any coffee on campus. You had to literally walk off campus to find a Starbucks to drink coffee. I don't understand how the Mormons are so nice and don't drink coffee. That doesn't make any sense to me.
I did get it wrong about the birth control. I had a lot of Mormon friends while I was in high school, and I had one friend that was like one of 9 kids.
Wow.
And so I just assumed from that situation that, oh, these people don't practice birth control. But I guess the Mormons don't have an opinion on birth control.
I'm not sure. I mean, I, a Jew, knew that Catholics were very anti-birth control. I don't know about Mormons, though.
Right.
I would assume they would be soft on it because the whole like having multiple wives and stuff. But oh, look at this. So sorry. Mick Scruffles for $5 says Sitch and Seamus. Can you both say I agree with that in the Dave Rubin voice? That would make my day. Well, sorry, I came in after you already left, but
yeah.
Of course, Seamus's best cartoon was "It's Not For You."
Yes, because we were in that cartoon.
We were in that cartoon.
We got to be a part of that cartoon.
We did. Ace for $10 says Sitch and Adam are a great example of weaponized civility. Adam cries bad faith whenever slightly pushed on his dumb ideas, and Sitch covers up for him because he actually believes Adam's cries of bad faith.
I resisted.
Mm.
I didn't call it bad faith. I was like, what is the word? But not bad faith. I don't want to say bad faith. I don't want to accuse him of bad faith, but the voting thing was getting under my skin because obviously it's just one person's vote versus 7 votes.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you're talking about one person yielding 7 votes, and he's even in favor of. I mean, it was so obvious. I didn't understand why it was so difficult to just acknowledge. Okay,
Well,
we're
I don't
talking about.
know regarding Ace's super chat. I don't know if it's even was in reference to anything that happened today because this was 15 minutes in the conversation, which was not when the voting conversation was going on.
Was that
So
who first? That was Ace's super chat that you just read.
yeah, but it was
Oh,
only
okay.
15 minutes in the stream, so I don't. Maybe he was referring to something on Sunday, but
Well, I know specifically, and I want points for not saying you're being bad faith because I completely stopped myself. I was like, I'm not going to call Seamus
I applaud
bad
you,
faith.
Adam. I applaud you.
So,
No,
but I did like I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is just so fucking simple. We had a debate with Carl, not last time it was on. I think it was a time before, where he wanted to slip into a debate about what middle class was and argue that there was no such thing as a middle class. And I was like, well, at this point, fuck it. Like, that's the thing that triggers me most in debates. And I guess I have to work on this. I'm unused to people because I'm always debating you and you would never do this. I'm unused to people who will be like, oh, there's this totally basic term, middle class, that we all have a general understanding of. And they will just argue that that term magically doesn't exist anymore and nobody knows what it means.
Right.
And I'm like, what the fuck are we doing here?
Right.
For real? Doesn't that seem bad faith? It seems like
it depends what their
picture of bad faith.
It depends what their intention is, right? If the intention is to
obfuscation, that's what their intention is.
It's bad faith. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think there was any. I don't think there's any bad faith in the conversation today.
Not at all. Not at all. So. That's why.
Noel screaming into the void for $5 says Brandon Sanderson, J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, Mel Gibson, on and on. It's not our fault. Hollywood is full of nepo babies that ruin everything.
Oh.
Yes, sure.
Those are all nepo babies. Mel Gibson.
Well, no, she's saying that those are not nepo babies.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, Mel Gibson kind of fucked himself in other ways, but none of those other people did that I'm aware of. Arnold Zara was here for $5. Says I read that one. Insensitive for $2 says, what race is it? I don't know what that was in reference to.
I don't either.
Lieutenant Sasquatch for $2 says, everything living is a clump of cells, Adam. Checkmate.
Some bigger than others.
Checkmate. Ace for $5 says, you guys thought whitewashing Kirk wasn't enough to paint you as righted stooges, so you do an episode with a guy who wants abortion doctors jailed.
Ace, neither of us give a fuck if people paint us as right-wing stooges, okay? Those people are fucking morons. I don't see how anyone could listen to this conversation today and go, oh my God, they're so right-wing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Ace needs to take us a moment to pause, because I think you sent that in before, before Adam was engaged in the abortion argument or the gay marriage argument or those other things. Like, so yeah, first of all, we don't really, I mean, it is annoying if people are like, oh, you're this thing that you're not, but they shouldn't let you be controlled, nor should it be like, oh, well, we're not allowed to talk to
Seamus because we're worried about that.
Or something.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's very different between talking to someone that you disagree with and you talk about those disagreements versus like, if you have someone that you supposedly disagree with and you just agree with everything they're saying at that moment, then that's like a completely different conversation. But that obviously is not what happened today. So
it's so rare that you can find good interlocutors that disagree with you and have an intelligent and civil conversation. So it's just
right. The only thing that you said, Adam, which I was like, oh, I sighed. It didn't come off on the microphone, and I didn't want to like get into a long debate about it. Was I don't like every time you say Charlie Kirk was a moderate. I do not think he was a moderate.
Right.
That's like saying like Rush Limbaugh is not a moderate like person. He doesn't have moderate beliefs. So
Okay.
the Book of Dark for
What
two
is
Oscar.
his unmoderate position? Just out
I
of
would
curiosity.
I would say believing that Biden should be executed for treason is not a moderate position. I would say his
Well,
position,
what did Biden do that he thought he should be executed for?
just being corrupt, general levels of corruption and mismanagement.
Hmm.
There wasn't like a specific thing in the club.
Should people be executed for corruption? I guess probably not, right?
Would I mean would if someone left said
Depends
I
upon
think
the
Donald
level of
Trump should
corruption,
be
obviously.
yeah, if
So
someone said on the left I think Donald Trump should be executed for treason, would you say, well, that's a moderate? That's a moderate position to have?
no, yeah, good point.
So yeah, I don't think that's a moderate position. I don't think the whole clip that we saw about believing that the Democrats are intentionally sending Haitians to rape Republicans is a moderate position. He had several times saying he doesn't believe in a separation of church and state. I don't think his positions on I don't think his position on abortion is a moderate position. Again, people can have these positions. That doesn't make them evil or bad, but I don't think they're moderate positions.
Right. You don't think he's a racist, though, right?
I don't think Charlie Kirk was racist. No,
No. Yeah.
no.
So was he a moderate when
But
it
see,
came
maybe
to
that's the
race?
problem is that if and I'm glad you brought that up because I think a lot of times if you say someone's not a moderate, the implication is, well, they're a radical, they're an extremist, or they're racist or something, which is not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But if you
That
say
I
he's
think
like
that is the problem because
right, right.
I'm the thing that people are trying to paint him as is a
Yes,
racist.
right,
All of
right,
this other stuff that you're talking about, which I agree are not moderate positions. It would be strange to call them moderate positions. So when
right.
I say moderate, I'm really just saying moderate on the race issue because that's what people are trying to turn him into. David Duke.
Well, yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think there's two levels of it. Like there's moderate temperament and moderate on policy issues. And I think he was more moderate on temperament. Like he would seem nice and stuff. But I don't see him as being very moderate on most policy issues he's pushing for. He's just very strictly very conservative on almost all the
Yeah, and
policies
I
he
don't
was
know his
pushing for.
position. I don't know his position on gay marriage. I know that he was friendly towards having gay people involved in turning points
Mm-hmm.
and gay people involved in the conservative movement. So, but I don't know. Maybe he's like, yeah, join our movement, but he can't get married.
I believe he was against it. I mean, I've heard him
Yeah.
speak. I've heard
Well,
him
fuck. Then he's not a
defend.
moderate. Fuck that guy.
I've heard him defend having gay people involved in Turning Point USA.
Hmm.
But I've also heard him speak very poorly of like the concept of being gay in terms of
Hmm.
like, oh, they're teaching your children to be gay and gay marriage and all this other stuff. So
It was
you don't want
interesting that Seamus, wow, his justification on the trans issue and the gay issue were the same, but I guess it's not.
Mhm.
I mean, it would be. You need a justification, so
Right.
why not make it? Yeah, it's not true.
Yeah, I know that moderate right wing does not mean centrist. Um,
No, not at all. Yeah.
no. It'd be interesting. I don't know. You'd have to like really
Would you
because a
call him
lot of it
far
is sort of
right
vibe.
because of those positions?
It's
Probably
sort of
not.
vibe based because like yeah, I haven't done a an extensive poll study to be like here's every left wing position, here's every right wing position. Let us find the exact point of moderation. So
Far
there's a lot
right
of vibe
implies
basing going on
racist.
here.
Yeah.
So
So look, I don't know better. Hmm.
he
Well,
was
I
just
don't think we're going to
he's
be
just
talking about it
conservative.
much.
He was just a conservative guy. I think he's a very conservative guy.
Hmm. Maybe regular conservative.
Well, why I don't know if you should put any sort of qualification on it. He was just a conservative,
Hmm.
right? Like that's not a bad thing. Some people interpret it as like, well, if you
Well,
say a
all the people I
conservative,
saw celebrating his death were celebrating it because he was a racist.
right,
That was like the number one reason people were celebrating because he was a racist.
right,
And I
right.
don't think he was a racist. So I'm I'm not sure how to say that in an environment where if you say someone's conservative, they hear racist. So
We can just say he was conservative and not. I mean, you can qualify it like he was not racist.
he was a
He was just a
conservative, but not
conservative.
one of the
Yes.
racist ones. I
Well,
don't
I don't
think
even.
that's really,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Well, whatever.
I know it's a tough
Language
one,
is
but
language is
hopefully,
complicated.
look, we're not really going to be talking about this much more anyway. So
Sure. Sure. Brian for just now for $20 says Kirk was a conservative, so he's not a moderate in the sense that he's a centrist. What people are saying Kirk is not. But what people are saying Kirk is not a moderate in the sense that they want him to be a bad person, and he wasn't a bad person. Yeah, that's I understand that.
yes,
Like,
yeah,
there's all this sort of I don't know what the word is. There's all this obnoxious sort of linguistical interpretation that gets implicitly said whenever you use words, even though that's not really what you mean. So again, Charlie Kirk, I don't think was a extremist by any metric. He definitely, I don't think he was racist, but I don't think he was a moderate in terms of his policies that he's pushing for,
props to
or
you for
his
letting it go, though.
ideology. Well, I didn't get. I know it'd be this whole thing.
I
That's not
know,
really want to get
not
into.
helpful.
The
I
Book of
couldn't
Dark
let
for
the gay thing go.
that's fine. Yeah, no, it's fun. I enjoyed
It
it.
just it is a little maddening. It's like, oh yeah, people don't seem to realize that they're completely impinging on other people's freedoms.
Mm-hmm.
Marriage is a project that a lot of people want to engage in, and denying people engaging in the projects that they want to engage in, especially if they don't really hurt anyone else. I know they would make the argument, oh, it's detrimental to society. It's hurting all of us. But
I
I
don't.
disagree.
I don't think the concept of like something was a moderate position in the past means it's considered a moderate position today.
No,
I guess yeah.
being
And what?
racist was considered a moderate position
Right,
in the
right.
past.
And I guess yes. What is the definition of moderate? To me, what moderate means is like average. What is the average? What is the mean position? Of people would have sort
It
of.
means well within the Overton window.
Yeah, yeah. What are sort of like the average belief structure here? Well, actually, I shouldn't even say. Actually, it's not the average. It's not really true. I guess it's more like what you're saying. It's well within. Maybe it's some combination of what is average combined with what is well within the Overton window of acceptability.
Yeah.
It's kind of a hard. I hate to say it's kind of like the pornography. I'll know it when I see it argument. It might be hard to specifically nail down a criteria for it.
What
But
is
yeah,
your
obviously
evidence that they weren't sending Haitians to rape all your daughters? Come
there you
on,
go.
Sitch.
Yeah, exactly. I know. But no, it's like there, yeah, as you said, I mean, there's lots of positions that were, the moderate position back in the day. The moderate position, I think in my grandparents' time, that a lot of people had in the South was that like, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't enslave black people, but they're inferior.
They're obvious. Yeah.
They
I
can't
know. It's
it's
terrible.
like, okay, that's the moderate position. It's like, oh, all right, well, I guess.
Obama won being against gay marriage.
Yeah, that's true.
Obama said the
That was the moderate position not very long ago.
yes.
So yeah,
Yeah.
not anymore.
On the left.
Well, it's interesting because now I'd say gay marriage is the moderate position in terms of it seems like even most conservatives are afraid, or I should say Republicans specifically, and conservatives would be afraid to really push heavy to make gay marriage illegal because they think it'd be very bad politically.
I think many conservatives would though. Look, there's a lot of people in our chat that are like against gay marriage.
Yeah, but that's not indicative of the average in America.
Okay.
Whenever they've done polling, most Americans are in favor of gay marriage now, which is why Republicans
that's
are
good.
very afraid to reach that question again. And they're kind of satisfied with just being like, oh, it's already been decided by the courts. We don't have to deal with it.
They just need to make it illegal for them to kiss in public. That's
There
what they
you go.
need. Constitutional amendment. No PDA. No gay PDA on the streets.
Ace for another one. The Book of Dark for 2 Aussie bucks says your amount and message will be public. I don't know what that
Good.
means. You're talking about the super chat? Then yes. I don't know if you're referring to something
It
else.
is, but thank you. Thanks for the
Clockwork
super-
for Clockwork for $5 says the Book of Dark's amount and message has been made public. I guess that is true. That happened. Ace for $5 says, Sitch, how much do you bench press? Because
this was
Adam
a good
and
one.
Adam and Sammy's hack takes force you to do a lot of heavy lifting, so I expect you to be jacked. You know that meme where there's like the really buff guy and he's talking to the guy who has the giant head, and the buff guy's like, "Where do you work out?" And the other guy's like, "The library." That's where I'm jacked. It's all in the head. I look like one of those. Was it the hydrocephalus babies or whatever? However you say it.
I love that
Big head
Sammy
babies.
G and Ace are like fighting in the super chats.
Well, yeah. Well, apparently on Sunday, Ace and Sammy were going back on it, going back and forth to each other in the chat. So Sammy likes to get a rise.
It's great.
She likes to try to trigger me when we get in these conversations.
Oh, I wish I was there sometimes. Oh, that'd
We
be so
should.
good.
I swear to God, like me and Sammy have generated hours
Of
of
content? Yeah, exactly.
hours of
You just
content
got to
that
hit record.
I'm just so mad that I don't have a
Do it.
microphone
Upload it. We'll do it members
somewhere.
only. If you
Like,
guys want
yes,
to hear Sitch and Sammy fight, become
should
a member.
set up a microphone somewhere that I'm like, hold on, we're arguing. Can I just press the
Just pull
button?
your phone out. You can't do it secretly. What are you, Destiny? You can't do that. Come on.
No. She would know about it. I'm just saying.
Don't set up a
I don't think
microphone.
I don't think it
Just pull
sounds
your
very good
phone
if we
out and
did
hit
it
record.
with the phone, but
What do you mean? The phone sounds great.
yes. Okay. Sammy for $5 says, Sitch, when we get fancy sushi for dinner tonight, make sure to thank Ace for that money that pays for our meal. A woo.
She's talking about Ace's money there.
Yes, she is. Yeah. Will do. Thank you, Ace, for the sushi money. The Book of Dark for $5 says, has anyone ever heard of the names James Bulgler, John Venables, and Robert Thompson?
No.
No, I'm unfamiliar with
Maybe
who
they're
those people are.
conservatives.
Become the Night for $10 says, what's the empirical evidence that proved empiricism? Checkmate, Adam.
Yeah.
There you go.
Empiricism is the belief that there is a natural world and that we can know it, and that natural world contains physical evidence that we can use to prove things. So, but I don't, that doesn't necessarily prove empiricism. I think the thing with philosophy is you get one thing in the beginning that kind of establishes the whole philosophical system, and that thing you just take on faith. That's right. Correct.
Yeah.
I mean,
everything,
just,
yes.
yeah.
Everything, if you keep cutting it down to its core, is going to lead you to some sort of faith-based principle at the very end of the day,
which
is unavoidable. Yeah. But in terms of empiricism, I mean, I would put my weight behind empiricism too, because to me, it shows like empiricism has been something that, following that philosophy or that idea, has definitely created the most repeatable, conclusive success in terms of how reality works scientifically.
Success in technological development and cultural development. But the thing that you take on faith is that there is a natural world that we can understand, that is knowable to us through trial and error, experimentation, that kind of thing.
Well, I mean,
but again, look, we could all be heads in a jar somewhere.
Of course. At the end of the day, you get stuck in the I think therefore I am.
Right. Yeah, dilemma, exactly.
So.
We could live in the simulation and this all just be a fraud.
Right. Ace for $10 says sea oysters would be a better option than sushi. They're the best fuel for midnight misadventures. I'd be proud if I helped bring little Sitches into the world.
Oh, wow. Look at this. That's a great rebuttal there.
Where is the idea that oysters help with sex even come from?
Yeah, I don't know.
Where does that even? I'm curious. Because oysters, they don't seem very sexy when you eat them. They seem kind of not sexy.
Not at all. Yeah.
They have a very strong scent. They're pretty messy. Most people think they're gross. So
yeah.
I'm not sure where the aphrodisiac comes from, but. Says oysters are widely considered aphrodisiac due to their historical reputation and high zinc content, a mineral linked to male sexual function and testosterone level. However, there's no definitive scientific evidence proving oysters increase libido. Interesting. There you go. Squeeze her, I hardly Louise her. I like that for $5. Says humans wouldn't be flawed in my system. My system is that everyone has to do what I say, and I would simply tell them not to be flawed. Vote Squeezy. Got him. Kick Nastanza for $2 says, I'm like Lib Jesus. Get crucified in this chat. taking a stanza, dying for the sins, yes, of the chat. The Book of Dark for 5 Aussie bucks says, let's just become an anarcho-capitalist society already. Ooh, not a fan. Zero Fox for 37 months says, would love to see Ryan Mulally on to discuss natural rights. He's a lawyer, former teacher with a background in philosophy and expressed interest in a collab. Yeah, actually, I was gonna watch. I didn't have time to watch it. I saw that he had some long arguments with Not So Erudite. I was gonna check that out to see what that was about. Shortside Goblin for $2 says Adam Palestine voted for Hamas. Yes, that's on the whole the voting thing. They never really got the revote
What?
though.
I'm back.
Shortside Goblin
What?
said that the Palestinians voted for Hamas in regards to your voting tag. Do you
Okay.
have a response to that, or just okay?
Well, I think, look, obviously, if they had a chance to vote again, they would have voted Hamas out, but Hamas basically took power and never let them vote again. So I don't,
Right.
obviously I acknowledge mistakes can happen in voting. They voted for prohibition. Okay.
Right.
It was a mistake, right? Then they voted to stop it because it's just, it gives it is at its heart a feedback from society. Society shows up and says, this is how things are going with us, right? And when you poll, the more people you poll, the more accurate polling you're going to get. So,
Right. Brian for $50. Thank you, Brian. Says to Steelman, the gay marriage argument is okay to have all the benefits and rights given to all people legally married, but he would want it called civil union while marriage remains in the realm of the church. That way, everyone shares the same rights. So, I mean, I've heard that that's like a very common argument. Seamus didn't say that, which is interesting. I don't know if he didn't say that because he doesn't believe it or because it's just something that he assumes that we've already heard before. So I'm not actually sure if that's his position, unless he said it somewhere else that you've heard. In terms of that position, I don't know. To me, it's like kind of silly because it's funny. It kind of it really feels like this like weird dignity argument. Like, well, we just believe there's some sort of dignity associated with like this terminology, and we don't want to like share a conceptual space with something that we find icky. Which, if that's the only argument, I hate to say it, but I think people just have to get the fuck over that. I don't think that's really a valid argument for anything at all. So
that's exactly what's going on. It's identity politics
on
both sides because gay people are saying, look, you're treating us like second-class citizens. We've got this different name for our marriage. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And the people on the right are like, you're shitting all over our dignity. Marriage is for us.
Right. So I don't think it's a good argument. And then also, I mean, we had a long debate with Carl about this. I don't even think the argument's even true. The argument that a lot of Christians make about marriage historically, where they say, oh, marriage was a historically religious organization, was originally a religious institution and that it was for procreation, when there's all the evidence is really against that marriage existed, or something like marriage existed long before modern religions ever existed. It's not like everyone was in a polycule before, Christianity and Judaism came into being. And then on top of that, it's actually the opposite. The point of marriage isn't to make it so you have children. The point of marriage is to make it so you have less children, so that you have children with only one person. Or even if in societies where they had polygamy, it was to denote whose children belong to whose for the rights of property rights and to settle those disputes. So the idea that I do think that there's like a modern idea of marriage, which is new. There's a million people have talked about sort of the modern idea of love marriage and all this other stuff. The idea that like the modern concept of like love marriages being associated with religion or deriving from religion or Christianity is just flatly not true at all. And it's not true historically either. So I just don't buy any of these arguments. Gypsy Harlow for $5 says advocating for monarchy will always be more gay, though. Oh, I read that one. Checkmate, Seamus. Down with the king, long live the cowboy. Short Gamma for $5 says, I've noticed sometimes Adam puts words in people's mouth or steers the conversations into a topic and then gets triggered by it.
Well, okay.
Alex Wright for
What?
$5 says, yes, we need a social credit system to decide who votes. LOL. What are we talking about? Chinese flag down thumb. Yeah, I don't like any of that concept whatsoever.
Look, that totally triggers me when they talk
I
about,
noticed.
taking the
Yeah.
vote away from people. These people
Right.
shouldn't vote. The people
Well,
who are
that's what
voting against me shouldn't vote. Oh,
right.
wow.
Right.
That gets my
Alex,
hackles up.
I read
Sitch.
that one.
That gets me
I
very
know.
angry.
I know. As soon as it came up, I know. I could feel it. I could sense it. Squeeze her. I hardly lose her for $2 says, how about exclusively custodial voting, one per kid? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's what it is. One per kid.
How about exclusively custodial voting, one / per kid? Is that what do you mean? Isn't that what it's supposed to be?
They count these kids in state representation. They count every single one of them. At the moment
I
you're
know.
born, they add another person to the state for state representation. And if that person is the person that pushes you over the edge to get another congressperson, you get another congressperson, even though they're a fucking baby.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously they're getting representation. They're counting in the political system. They just don't get a vote, and nobody gets a vote for them. It's ridiculous.
This Paffy for $5 says, wow, Adam, what kind of a-hole just calls someone gay with no justification?
C.S. Paffy calls me gay all the time, so he needs to fucking chill out.
He's just joking with you.
Yeah, I'm sure
That's
he
the
was.
joke. Yeah. Short Side Goblin for $2 says, CS, what's wrong with being gay? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what is wrong?
Right.
Well, no, you're gay.
Oh, Brian says it means that you don't get a right to vote unless you have a kid. Oh, I see. Oh, exclusively. I got you. Exclusively
Oh,
custodial voting. So you have to have a child to vote.
yeah,
I don't agree with that, obviously, but
yeah, I don't either.
Caleb for $2 says Jesus Christ was historically the OG libtard.
Really?
That's a strong argument. Become the Knight for 30 months says this was an awesome conversation. Would love to see more Seamus. Yeah, I like talking to Seamus.
Sounds like he wants to come on, so
yeah,
he's welcome to.
Caleb for $2 says, quote, all men are created equal is wrong and regarded. I don't know if they actually meant regarded or they meant retarded. It was a typo, but
Equal in the eyes of the law, I think, is the. I don't think they let you say retarded in the super chats for some reason. So.
oh, okay, right.
So people have adopted regarded as.
Gotcha.
But
Gotcha.
all men are equal in the eyes of the law that really isn't even totally true, because a rich guy is going to be able to get better attorneys and representation than someone who has no money and gets the public
It's supposed
defender.
to be. It's supposed to be.
It's an ideal, yeah. It's aspirational.
Well, it's the same thing with all men are created equal. It's supposed to be. It's in the Declaration of Independence. It's supposed to be under the concept of like everyone is born with unalienable natural rights. And they possess this sort of equal level of dignity and under the eyes of the government of the law. I don't think that when it was written by the founding fathers,
That
they
they
did not
actually
mean
believed
that
it.
they did not. Well, they did believe it. They didn't mean, and I think this gets constantly like
They meant
wrongly.
between them and the king, though. They didn't mean between them and the slave.
They meant they did not mean that like all men are created equal in terms of that all men are blank slates that all have the same level of skills and natural talents.
No,
They did not believe that.
they did
And
not. Yeah.
John Locke or John Smith didn't believe that, back in the day. And I feel like that's something that gets kind of incorrectly attributed to Enlightenment thinkers.
Correct.
Val Van Gogh for $5 says Seamus is like a breath of fresh air after the lefty clown parade you guys had on after Charlie Kirk's death.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad you appreciated it. Look, Zero Fox for $2 super chatted retarded.
Oh, he did?
It came out in the super chat.
Oh, maybe they're just. Maybe it's autocorrect getting them.
Maybe. Theoden King of Brohan for 31 months says, great conversation. Watch Anti-Woke Dog and hide your spoons. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Michael the Dober Dad for Two Canadians says incentives drive culture. Adam Friended 2019.
That's exactly right. That's totally correct.
Hayden Dill for 39 months of discipline equals freedom says the only one who needs a shot collar is Adam so that Sitch can keep his work wife under control. No,
Cool.
A team is the best team in this house. S class, best class.
Well, I guess we know where Hayden Dill stands.
Thank you, Hayden. Agla here for 35 months says S class is best class. Thank you for, I've never had one of these in 6 months, so I do appreciate that. And that's for Sitch and Seamus. I love the first episode, Seamus. Looking forward to the rest. Steve Sugars for $10 says, I don't really understand the moral opposition to the day after pill when we are not opposed to the timing method or condoms. Why do we feel sentimental about zygotes and gametes? Yeah, I guess that maybe that'll come up in an abortion conversation or some other conversation. I don't know what the justification is because to me, as a not Christian, it makes like it doesn't make sense to me that like logically that God would be like, you can time to not get pregnant, but you can't pull out or you can't use a condom. Like I don't know, that just it doesn't really make sense to me what the difference is unless the argument's like, well, it can still happen by accident because then God can still make you get pregnant. But if that's the case, I mean, God's God. God get you make pregnant if you use a condom, right? So I don't know. I don't really understand the distinction there.
You can't really argue the potential life situation just because it's not persuasive for people. They've got their minds made up.
Mm-hmm.
They see it as this is a person, and you can tell them, oh well, 40% of fertilized zygotes don't even make it to the first trimester. You can tell them like there's this vanishing twin syndrome where a lot of twins are created and absorbed by one or the other twin. So there are all these crazy situations that happen in nature, but it doesn't make any difference. They're
Well,
like,
yeah, but there's a lot of when it comes to that, most religions, Christianity included, lean heavily on things that happen in nature must be God's will, so therefore it's acceptable.
right.
So
Yeah, no, I
if
get
a
that. I
right, so
totally get that. Yeah.
that would be the justification for that stuff.
Well, then why is God letting all these abortion doctors be born? Because that's God's will.
Well, that there'd be some
Why is
argument
the
about
abortion not God's will?
because there would be some argument about humans have free will and thus are allowed to sin in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like the philosophy is like things you have control over, humans have control over. That's where your free will comes in, where you can choose to sin or not to sin. But something like a baby being born in a womb and getting absorbed, or a zygote or a fetus or whatever, being
Is a natural
absorbed
process.
is that must be God's will because it's outside of humans' control. Therefore, you're not choosing a sinful or non-sinful act.
Right.
That
I don't.
now, if we develop the technology to prevent that, then it would maybe say the Christians would say would enter into the realm of being sinful if you choose to allow it to happen.
I only say it to illustrate that you can always find some kind of justification, and people do.
Yes. General Bauer 129 for 2 months says Seamus love Twisted Plots pilot. I'm glad I donated and can't wait to see it succeed. Nice.
Oh, cool.
Shortside Goblin for 2 hours says abolishing slavery wasn't democracy, it was force. That's actually not true. It was both. Because the whole reason the Civil War even spawned was because the South understood that slavery was going to be abolished through democratic process, and that's why they all broke off. It was to prevent democratic process from coming into effect, even though their secession was actually illegal. And so then force had to be used to bring them back into the fold and to abolish slavery after that point. Moondoggy for $10 says, starting my vacation to Japan. Want to shout out to the best comedy show before going. Love you guys. Well, we'll have a lot of fun.
Yeah, have a great trip.
That sounds
Sounds
awesome.
like fun.
Me and Sam are gonna go to Japan at some point next year, and it's funny because we're like I'm like I'll still stream on with you on Sundays. Probably won't do like Tuesdays or Thursdays for like the 2 weeks that we're over there. but it's gonna
Awesome.
the time is gonna be like really wacky for me because I'm pretty sure normal stream time in Japan is like 6 in the morning or something.
Really?
It's a
Wow.
weird
My
time. Yeah,
schedule.
right.
Be forced to be on my schedule. That'd be
Be
great.
awful. Meme spread for $5 says, if Seamus is so Christian, why isn't he using Temple OS right now? It's God's third temple, you know. Got him.
Oh, is that the Christian Microsoft?
Is it, or is it just called Temple?
I don't know.
Actually, I don't even know what Temple OS even is. Temple OS is a biblically themed operating system. Oh, wow. Never even heard of this.
What happens if you search porn on that operating system?
It
Does your
stops you.
computer like explode?
It shuts down. Yeah,
It just shuts down.
it should. It should.
That's great.
EBO8 1997 for 3 months. Thanks so much. Says, hey guys, Seamus, what do you think of The Chosen? Sorry, he left before he could answer that. That's was that the Jesus miniseries? I think.
I tried. I a couple times was trying to get to everyone's super chat. People were accusing me of trying to kick Seamus off the show.
No, I mean,
So,
listen, people got it. They got stuff to do. So
no, I get it.
Mick Scruffles for $5 says Sitch and oh, I read that one. Saul for $5 says the reason Sasha Grey was saying the backlash against Hassan was homophobic is because people were calling him the F word. Oh, were they? I didn't even see that. I assume people just call people every slur at all times, regardless of the circumstances. So
Right. Especially if they're anonymous. So,
there is an interesting new wrinkle. I'm sure you saw. Someone in the chat didn't see this. There's an interesting new wrinkle in the Hassan shock gate, which was someone found a clip of a very clear the device, the little clicking device that you would hit to do whatever the caller is supposed to do on his desk. And in one shot, you can see it. And then he kind of like surreptitiously moves it out of frame, hoping no one really notices. So,
yeah, there's a ton of evidence. People just weren't looking for it. Now they
right,
are. Now they're
right.
searching it out. And
Yeah, yeah.
spoiler, Hassan is a fucking liar.
Yep.
I don't how do you not know that there's a ton of evidence for this out there when you decide to lie to the audience? How do you not know that that evidence is immediately going to be brought to light?
Of course. Well, because it doesn't matter. Like once you've created, if you're like a believer of someone, if you're like a big fan of someone, and you just give them enough of an excuse to hang on to, people will just hang on to it forever. They'll never change course on that.
But you yourself know you're a fucking liar. You're a
No,
liar.
I think they convinced themselves. I think they just
He's convinced himself that it's not a
Oh, no.
shot caller.
Oh, Hassan.
What?
Yeah,
What?
no, I'm sorry. I thought you meant the fans. Yeah, Hassan knows
No.
he's a liar. Yes, 100%.
There's no fucking way Hassan has not convinced himself
knows.
that's not a shot caller.
He 100% knows, yeah. And actually, there was another clip too. It was funny. There's some streamer who was like friends with Hassan who was trying to defend him, saying that she saw the caller like right afterwards. And she's like, oh, it's not a shot collar. But then she said that it had like tape on it. That it was taped over. And I was like, bro, like, wait a minute. What? You're saying it's not a shot collar? Why did it have tape on it? What was the point of the tape then?
He can't shock that dog anymore. That dog's gone. That dog is so gone. We should be putting up a betting pool on how long the dog lasts.
Right. Yeah, it was Cutie Cinderella. Yeah, saying. So. Oh, she said it can shock, but you remove the prongs so it can only vibrate? Are you sure? I thought she said that it only vibrates, but that it had tape on it. And that's like, well, how would she know, what it can do if it only has tape on it? But
that poor dog. Oh, I hate thinking about it. I get so sad.
Oh, you're right. Okay, hold on. You're right. She actually says, I misunderstood the clip. It's even worse. She said, oh no, it's a different clip that I saw, I guess. She said in a different clip, there's no shock. The electric prongs are taken out of it. It's only vibrate. There's a setting for vibrate and there's a setting for shock. Oh my God. Okay, I didn't even see that clip. That's crazy. So she does seem like she's completely confirming.
Is this an old clip?
No, it's a new clip. I'll send it to you if you want. I can bring it up. I saw a different clip. Wow. Okay.
I gotta go.
Okay. Well,
Don't you
here,
remember?
yeah. Let's finish this up here. Let's see, read that one. Buckethead for 24 months. Thanks so much for being 2 years. Real Secret says, hello, I have a free chat. My husband got me addicted to League. I am now against gay marriage. Okay. Sell for $10 says, my mom, an old school non-MAGA Republican who never heard of him before he died, thought he was extreme. I don't know if that's based on the quotes taken out of context. J-Mac or Circuit Fire, thanks so much, Dad. J-Mac for the $50 says, damn, I missed so much. Such an Adam must be all this grass touching I'm doing at Universal Orlando. Yeah, hope you're having fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Zero Fox for $2 says, retarded. Caleb for $5 says, also the declaration scapegoats the king for all the grievances, but many, like the Stamp Act, etc., were acts of parliament that the Brits voted on. LOL. JMac for another $10 says, I'm retarded. Oh, he was able to put two. What are the rules, YouTube?
Oh, there you
For
go.
$5 says, Sitch, Temple OS was made by Terry A. Davis, the world's greatest programmer. Frederick Kunnison has a great video on him. He's the origin of the term glowy. Oh,
Wow.
fascinating. Anonymous Cow for $10 says, on post-liberalism, I think Carl has been more convincing. I don't think liberalism has a proper response to a mass rival of citizens that behave tribally. I think we're unfortunately headed for a balkanization in 50 years. I 10,000% disagree.
Yeah,
Girl
me
Server
too.
for $5 says, ever notice that a lot of Sean's on this show? Actual Justice Warrior, Think Before You Sleep, Potentially Criminal. Seamus is here. Sean Doomer Combs. And of course, Sitch's real name is probably Sean. You caught me. Yeah,
Is
why are
it?
there so many Sean's here? What's up with that? Some kind of Sean conspiracy.
Sean's just a generic name.
Arrhythmus for $2 says, I don't think it's accurate to say that Charlie Kirk was a moderate generally, but I do think he would fall into the average conservative category. His views are almost across the board basic American conservative. Maybe that's a good way to frame it. Say he was a standard conservative.
Right. Greedy
Anyways,
racist.
thank you guys for coming. Thank you for your incredibly generous donations. Thank you, Seamus, for talking to us. It was a fantastic conversation. And I guess we'll have a video on our How to Kill a Franchise channel on Thursday.
Yes, we will. What is it we're reviewing?
Tron
Ares.
Tron Ares.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Sitch loved it.
I did. Wait, no. Okay.